Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
That April day, Kelly remembers it in great detail because it was a turning point in her life. The morning began, as was customary, with a boring breakfast. Her mother fiddled with the stove and cursed her unsettled life. When will it all end? I dread waking up in the morning, just waiting for another gift from fate. Wendy was constantly working on her life, highlighting the flaws, but she deliberately did not mention the pluses. Although there were many positive things about the recent changes, I decided to remind my daughter of that. Mom, are you being unfair to Lady Luck? Of course, she throws you various problems, but there are positive things in it. For example, your promotion can be considered a significant plus. The woman didn't even turn around. It's easy for you, Kelly, because you've never experienced human meanness. You think I just got this job. I wouldn't have taken it if it weren't for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm always your guardian angel, keeping you out of trouble. Wendy turned over a slice of bread and remarked contentedly how crusty they were. I got croutons. And notice, Kelly, and that I don't use machinery, I do everything by hand. You should. People are brainstorming, inventing useful appliances to simplify our lives. And in general, without modern achievements, we are stuck in one era for a long time. My daughter has a different opinion. As a professional chemist, I know very well what happens to products and when they are exposed to different external factors. Wendy, as an experienced surfer, caught her favorite wave, and Kelly clearly knew what it threatened her. The girl pleaded with Mammy. You've had another false start. You are still at home, not at your institute. Don't think you're smarter than your mother, and for some reason you're always making inappropriate remarks to me. Don't you think it's at least indecent? Wendy made a hurt face, and Kelly hastened to correct the situation. Mom, you're the best mom in the world, and I'm not trying to hurt you. On the contrary, I want you to pay more attention to yourself. You are young and very beautiful. The daughter's compliment had an effect, and the woman looked away embarrassed. What are you implying? You don't know. Mommy, you need to cheer up. It's spring. It's the best time for romantic encounters. Wendy didn't share Kelly's daughter's enthusiastic network. The time of my romance is long gone, leaving not so good memories. Mom, you're contradicting yourself. Brand daddy with the stigma of infidelity, but you can't forget him yourself. The department chair's daughter knew the family history in different variations. Wendy's own version was that her husband, who left her with a young daughter, was the ultimate bastard. According to the version of grandmother Vanessa, it was her daughter-in-law, not her son, who was to blame for the breakup of the family. But despite the serious disagreements on this issue, Vanessa regularly visited her daughter-in-law and granddaughter, although the son has long since found a new family and well settled in the capital. As soon as Kelly remembered her father, there was an oppressive silence in the kitchen. It even seemed to her that the aroma of fried bread became emphasized defiant. She wanted to turn everything into a joke. Mom, it seems to me that even the air is hot in here. Now the bell would ring and our incomparable Baba Vanessa would appear with her exceptional recommendations. Kelly had no sooner taken a breath than there was indeed a knock at the door. Wendy's bell rang insistently. Startled, she looked reproachfully at her daughter. She was the last thing we needed early in the morning. And what was the fashion of showing up unannounced? On the way to the hallway, the landlady launched into a tirade against Vanessa. But when she opened the door, she was silenced because instead of her mother-in-law, she saw a brightly dressed woman with a ridiculous hairdo. Clara. The guests radiated joy. Here I am. Hi there. My family. I apologize for the short notice. I didn't have time, and my goods are unusual, perishable. The woman walked unceremoniously into the apartment, hitting the landlady with her powerful shoulder. She apologized immediately, though. Sorry, Wendy. I almost boarded you, but it was your own fault for blocking the passage. Puffs of inordinate effort. Clara pulled out 2 suitcases and remarked contentedly, It's not a complete set. I've got 2 more cases in the storage locker. I'll go get them later. Kelly ran out into the hallway. The girl immediately recognized the guest. Mom, it's Aunt Clara. Don't you recognize your sister? Wendy sighed doomedly. Thank you, daughter, I know. Though I confess I didn't recognize her right away. Such a drastic change. The guests laughed and continued the phrase not finished by the hostess, so change. So the effect took place. I, on the advice of a familiar stylist or makeup artists, decided to completely change the image. My relative cooked so quickly that it was difficult to catch the meaning of the words she said. Complicated the situation. And the fact that during her fiery speech, the woman dragged suitcases into the room. And on this move, she did not even ask the permission of the owners. Wendy, dumbfounded by the unapologetic behavior of the visitors, asked Clara, "Sorry, and what do you have there in these suitcases?" "I have their very useful cargo, vitamins, checks, coffee, and I'll treat you. You can't come empty-handed." Clara lost her loins and turned to Kelly. "Help your aunt move the bags away from the aisle." The girl looked questioningly at her mother, and Wendy made the most sensible suggestion. "I don't think it's a good idea to drag those suitcases back and forth. Let them stand here. They don't bother anyone. I take it you're here on business, Clara." "Wendy, why the tone? We're relatives, and it's easier for us to address each other plainly." The guests sat down in a chair with a satisfied look and patted one bag with their hand. Kevin and I did an audit of our storage the other day and came to the conclusion that we have a surplus. And since the season is coming to an end, we need to sell this product as soon as possible. Such goods are cheap at our market. That's why I decided to come to you. I hope you don't mind." The smile faded from Clara's face. It was replaced by a look of wariness. "Wendy, embarrassed? Are you kidding again? Live and let love. Sell your tomatoes. Pears, apples, what pears?" Wendy didn't immediately realize that the relative was talking about the contents of the alls. "Wendy, there I have pears of 3 varieties, and apples for tomatoes are not in season yet. The weather is bad. Last week only seedlings in the ground poked. Of course, I have in the greenhouse and cucumbers, tomatoes, but not enough just for myself. Kevin told me." The owners never found out what Clara and her third husband said. The woman forcefully patted herself on the forehead with the palm of her hand and reached into her bottomless bag with a radiant smile. She pulled out a bag of assault rifles. "It's all blown out of my mind. I've been saving them all the way to deliver them to the targets. It's a new strain. My Kevin identified it himself." Clara handed her sister the bag, and Wendy inhaled the scent. It smelled delightful. "Thank you, Clara, for the guests. Really made me happy." Kelly looked at her watch. "Mommy, I think you're late already?" Wendy fussed. "The bosses are not late, they're late. And does not forget, daughter, that at my disposal personal transportation. So sister, you cannot worry, we will pick up your valuable cargo and deliver it to the market." Before she left, the woman smiled. "Kelly, you're right. There are a lot of good things in life, and it's nice to have relatives who can drop by unexpectedly." Clara asked her niece in surprise. "What's wrong with her?" "It's nothing. It's just that before you arrived, my mother and I had a little argument about the meaning of life. Let's go and have some tea." "I'd love to. I didn't have time for breakfast." On her way out, Clara followed Kelly into the kitchen. Previously, even before her parents' divorce, they used to go on vacation to Tuops every year as a family. Wendy's cousin had always kept a small outhouse on the reservation for them. But after Liam ran away, family traditions changed, and Kelly spent her summers at camp. Or is it Grandma Vanessa's? Wendy herself used her vacation to write scientific articles. To her mother-in-law's fair comment, "Wendy, have you ruined yourself by working?" The daughter-in-law reasonably replied, "If I don't work, we'll starve to death together with Kelly. After all, your son refuses to help financially." Vanessa didn't like it when her daughter-in-law reminded her of that, but they were hardened by life's hardships. The woman found a way out of any situation. She defended her son in every way possible and blamed Wendy for everything. If you had guessed your husband, he would not have run away. And it's not too late to go to him for help. The crown will not fall from your head. Wendy immediately put a stop to such talk. "I'm not going to humiliate myself in front of your son. Does not want to fulfill his parental obligations. God is his judge." But Kelly sees and understands everything and is unlikely to forgive such a grief-stricken father. Indeed, for all 8 years, the daughter has never once remembered her father. True, Grandma Vanessa regularly allocated her granddaughter money for pocket money. Aunt Clara, with a noise from the bread, came out hot tea. At least it warms the insides. Kelly, are you finishing school already? Not for another 2 years. Oh, so you and my babysitter are almost the same age. She's graduating this year. She wants to be an artist. I'm telling her not to, but she won't budge. I don't understand why girls are so eager to go on stage. What's so great about it? Kelly vaguely remembered. But the last time they'd been to her aunt's house, she hadn't been there at all. So the information about the strange girl had slipped past her consciousness, just for the sake of propriety. The girl asked where was she going to go to college. Clara was not the type to get lost, without a shadow of embarrassment. She blurted out the date. Do you have a college major? In my opinion, it's the best option. Your apartment is spacious. There's room for a relative. Aunt Clara took another sip of her drink with pleasure and closed her eyes. That's a nice, rich tea you got there. Kelly stared at the woman and thought her mother didn't even know that Clara had already distributed everything. The girl had heard quite a few stories before about their relatives who had a habit of showing up like a snowball. But she never thought that she and her mother would also suffer the fate of the host. After all, now they will have to tolerate not only the aunt herself, but also let her daughter into their house. All day long, Clara rested. The next morning, they all set off together with the rest of the luggage. The guest herself loaded the bags into the trunk of the car and quite noticed. Now it was safe to go to the bazaar. Wendy decided that it was time to clarify the daily routine. Clara, I'm sorry, but I'm pressed for time. Of course, I'll take you to the market, but I don't think I can drive you back. The auntie also cheerfully said it's all right. We can manage on our own. Do you have an assistant? You didn't tell me anything yesterday. Wendy, I didn't know anything yesterday. My brain wasn't working after the long drive. And this morning, I thought it was Saturday, which meant Kelly would be free. There was a squeal of brakes. Then klaxons patched from all sides and running past the cars. Kelly did not have time to orient herself, and she was thrown into the front seat. The girl rebuked her mother. Mom, can you do this to all of us? You should have warned her that you were going to brake. Clara joyfully announced, This is Kelly, your mother from Surprise. Apparently she's not to my liking. Wendy turned around. Guess your sister's not to her liking. I don't think my daughter belongs on the market. And what will people say if they see Kelly behind the counter? The department chair's daughter sells Wendy tomatoes, not tomatoes, pears and apples. How many times do I have to tell you? Optimism was flowing out of this active woman, and she wanted to share it with her relatives. Wendy, what are you chewing on? How is the market any worse than the grocery store? Personally, I don't see any difference. And then I'm not free. For a small favor, your Kelly will be rewarded. The girl immediately supported her aunt. Mom, Aunt Clara's right. She's gonna sell her own products. Wendy, I even have my papers. I got a certificate from our Rossbetriebnetzer. And if I have to, I can get a second opinion at the market. Come on, step on the gas. We're wasting time. Kelly was inspired by her new business. She saw trading on the market as an interesting adventure. Of course, the opportunity to make money was crucial. Despite a decent salary by today's standards, Wendy could not afford the planned expenses. Therefore, clothes, shoes, and other goods were purchased strictly on schedule. Sometimes it got a little tricky. Once in pursuit of a loyal price, they bought winter boots at the market. The girl had long dreamed of such stylish shoes and persuaded her mother. But she brought one for less than 2 weeks. Wendy assessed the damage with an expert's eye. Yes, they will definitely not take them to repair. And we will not be able to make a claim to him because they did not take the check. We'll have to buy new ones. But at the moment, alas, nothing will work because the plan is to buy wallpaper for the kitchen. So daughter, wait until the next paycheck. Kelly objected, Mommy, what am I going to wear to school? Do I have to swathe my legs with both of yours? The woman shook her head. I don't even know how to be or what to think of. Listen, daughter. They're on the mezzanine lying my work, in which I go to the forest. They're a little too big for you, but with a warm sock, they'll be comfortable. Kelly was torn. Mom, do you want me to embarrass myself in front of everyone on purpose? But imagine what they'll say about you when I show up at school in these ugly shoes. Kelly had hit the bullseye. The girl knew very well that her mother was very careful about her personal reputation. Wendy gave in and gave her daughter the last of her savings to buy another pair of shoes. But in doing so, she warned her daughter, I hope you realize that now you'll have to sacrifice buying a new jacket. Kelly started bitching to her mom, that's not fair. It's very fair. You're the one who bought the bad product, so you have to suffer. The girl's mother's decision had to be accepted. On the tempting offer of the aunt gave her heart hope that she could still buy a jacket. From the list of the latest trends. Since the niece did not understand anything in the market trade, the aunt herself engaged in the organization of the process, and she instructed to monitor the safety of the goods. Watch out, my good girl. There is such a crowd here that they'll break it and you won't even notice. Kelly smiled at Shutkin, and the phrases were sometimes so funny. While the aunt drew up the necessary documents, the girl tried to mentally visualize the process, but came to the conclusion that it was impossible to carry it out discreetly. She was only distracted for a few minutes, but it was enough time for a teenager who passed by. He grabbed a bag from the edge of the street and dashed along the aisles. What the kid didn't know was that Kelly was the district junior biathlon champion. A boomerang in the form of a big apple, which was given to her niece by her aunt, caught up with the boys in just the third second. The blow came between the shoulder blades and the guy howled in pain. There were cheers of approval. Well done, the girl famously molded. But not enough. At that moment, the aunt appeared. Seeing the unfortunate bag and apple, she immediately realized that I almost cuckooed, and I felt sorry for the goods and apple, a rare variety of my Kevin himself bread. Kelly's mood immediately dropped. She couldn't forgive herself for embarrassing herself in front of her aunt in the first few minutes. But Clara did not dwell on this little incident. She patted her niece approvingly on the shoulder. And I did not know that you so aptly dream of apples. True, I managed to catch only the final part, when the kid howled from the blow. But it was impressive. I'll call you today. I'll tell you about your feet. Aunt Clara, is that a feat? It's just an automatic reaction. I've been a biathlete since I was 10 years old. My dad got me into a sports school. The auntie made some kind of an incomprehensible noise, and then she asked, do you even see everything with him? No, my mom won't let me. And honestly, I don't want to. You grow up like that, and then they turn their faces away from you. It's not for me to judge. I don't know what happened between Wendy and Liam, but they were always such a nice couple, so polite and friendly. They came to visit us every year. Clara, you're distracting me. You're making me feel like we're wasting our time, and we're gonna be out of business. In case you've forgotten, that's why we came here. We've been doing a lot of business. Oiko gifts and nurseries looked impressive. The famous pears especially attracted the eyes of buyers. The weight of one fruit was half a kilo, or even more, and the fruit looked very respectable. Kelly was already in her mind, calculating the projected profits. But Clara warned her not to charge too much. It's easier to attract a buyer, and the process will go faster. I don't want to sit here for 3 days, and then I have to go home. I'm looking at a prom dress and shoes. Oh, by the way, you can advise me on this. Kelly has been kidnapped by her aunt's trust. She was liking the perky woman more and more by the minute. She mentally compared her to her mother and had to admit that Wendy's only advantage was her academic title. While the girl was busy with her thoughts, Clara was soliciting customers. Do not pass by apples, pennies, buy my southern goods and children and adults need. And those who buy 2 kilos discount from the company. Kelly watched the aunt, and she also very much wanted to throw away all the conventions and try herself in the role of invitations. But she imagined how her mother would react to such an initiative, and the hunt was gone at once. The girl filled bags with fresh goods, and Clara weighed and accepted payment. Already by lunchtime, they had sold out almost the entire stock of products. The aunt counted Kelly's receipts. The result was even better than I expected. But as promised, 10% for you. The girl took the money she had earned and hid it in a different harmonica. Just in case, she suggested. Aunt Clara, maybe we should stay a couple more hours to sell off the leftovers? The woman looked around in a deliberately demonstrative manner and said very loudly that we could handle a little longer. Our product was a big hit. There was something ostentatious, even theatrical, in the aunt's behavior. And the girl asked in a whisper, Aunt Clara, "What's wrong with you?" You leaned under the counter and quietly answered us. "Honey, we've got to get out of here. There's a good chance we're going to get beat up. You see those nice people at the stall, the cattle, the debt." Kelly looked in the direction her aunt had pointed and felt uneasy. Groups of southern-looking men were talking to each other and pointing at them. "Clara," she whispered at my command, "pull off the anchors and reception to the exit. You grab the empty suitcases and crates. The main thing is we run and don't turn around. If we do, they'll catch up with us." The woman didn't have time to finish her sentence. "I'll leave her alone." The men approached the counter. One with a noticeable accent. He asked the beautiful apples, "Do you have any?" Aunt Clara said with a sunny smile on her face, "Dear gentlemen, the shop is closed." Insistent customers began to demand that the shop was closed. "And everyone is still selling." A second fruit lover intervened. He was so nasty, very swarthy, brown eyes, but no beard or hair. Altogether, it looked like the man was training to be a clown, but then changed direction. A beautiful woman, mean as a fox. Why poach customers? And how wrong? You're supposed to be penalized for it. That's the rules. So they began to surround their place of business. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. Clara clutched her satchel and bellowed at the top of her voice, "And Kelly's on me." The market racketeers were confused. They did not expect such a jump from a provincial aunt in a ridiculous Tolstoy with Mickey Mouse on her chest and parted. Those precious seconds were enough for the women to run to the exit. But then their luck changed. Or maybe it was just the women's strength wasn't enough to cover the long distance. They were surrounded, and Clara whispered, "I think it's starting to smell bad." Kelly, as soon as those faces came near us, they started screaming. "This is a nice place to help us out. Tomorrow we'll go to another market to sell the leftovers." The girl did as the aunt instructed. On their shouts instantly ran away gawkers, among whom was a very active young man, without finding out the circumstances of the incident. He began to work with his fists, now began to already shout losers. By this time, police officers had just arrived. They did not begin to sort things out on the spot, but loaded everyone into the car, to the police station. We'll see who's right and who's guilty. We've seen all sorts of things, but this is the first time. I mean, come on. A woman and a girl standing up to the local racketeers. We should probably cut that gang a little slack. Wendy almost lost her senses when Clara called her and calmly said, "Wendy, Kelly and I are at the police station. I'll tell you all about it later." "Now help us out." The head of the department hurried to the Internal Affairs Department, and frightened by her sister's story, she hardly realized what had happened. She did not fail to rebuke her relative. "Clara, okay, you're an adult, but why drag a child into an unpleasant story?" Kelly decided to defend her aunt. "Mom, I'm not a child, and it's not Aunt Clara's fault. They started pressuring us. What were we supposed to do? Wouldn't you want the outcome to be any different? You're a smart woman." "Yeah, I think I got it." When the police drew up the reports and the women were released, the aunt asked Wendy's sister to help out that young man. He stood up for us right away. Basically, if it hadn't been for him, there's no telling what would have happened to us. In the compartment behind the bars sat an inseparable group of citizens who had decided to press Aunt Clara. A little farther away waited to decide their fate. A young man of athleticism, physique. Clara looked at the young man with adoration. How handsome is the real Apollo? I would like such a son-in-law. Wendy looked at her relative, so that she immediately ran out of steam. However, she complied with Clara's request and charged the unfamiliar young man when they were on the street. The boy said, "I know you, Wendy. I studied at your institute, and then my parents went to Peter and I transferred." The woman looked at the young man's face for a long time and then exclaimed, "I remember you. You still took part in the discussion club. There was a meeting with young scientists." "That's right. Me maxed, just in case. and the young man looked at Kelly with interest. "And you're good, smarty pants," screamed louder than a siren. Competent tactics. The most important thing in the first minutes to disorient the enemy. The girl was embarrassed, but responded with a compliment. "My aunt taught me that." But still, if you had not intervened in time, my aunt and I would not have been well. "They have such mean eyes." Max laughed. "You shouldn't look your opponent in the eye. That's the most common mistake. I hope you won't have to fight off any more bullies." Clara watched the young people with amusement. "Wendy, what a lovely couple. Do you want to get married now?" "Clara, you're crazy. Kelly's only 15. And you're her saint for the first guy she meets. And in front of the police station. What did I say wrong?" "Wendy, why do you keep sticking to me? The couple is really beautiful, just like you and Liam when you were young. It was just a little too brazen." And Wendy decided to put a stop to the market show. She said so bluntly, "Clara, I get the unpleasant impression that you can put on a show anywhere, whether it's the market or the police." "Kelly's our date." The head of the department looked at the car, and his stately figure disappeared into the night. The events of the next day tired the women, and they had a hasty supper and went to bed. Aunt Clara left on Monday, but promised that Emily would come very soon in her place. Even on the first day of her arrival, the aunt had praised her daughter at every turn. "My Emily has so many talents. She sings, and she used to dance at one time, then she went to a studio. Last year, she took a makeup course. She took lessons online, but they gave her a real certificate." Kelly kept silent because her talents were only diplomas and medals for biathlon competitions. So she really wanted to meet this mysterious Emily. Wendy sat in front of a large mirror and looked at her reflection with surprise. There was no time to be distracted by conversation. Only occasionally did she express her fantasy ideas aloud. "Aunt Wendy, don't you look familiar? Now we will make a little more frivolous and bangs, and get a completely new image." Without waiting for the approval of the client, the girl knocked down while dressing in the hall. "Now we will fix the whole construction in time. By the way, I recommend the latest product does not spoil the hair and firmly holds the style. Synchronously use just such means." Wendy gave her personal stylist a belittling look. "Wendy, I think it's enough that I don't want to look like a white crow because the conference will be attended by luminaries of science. And I'm afraid that my evening hairstyle will look ridiculous at this strict event." The girl wasn't even embarrassed. Aunt Wendy's a beauty. Nowhere to be found. And scientists are made of the same dough as ordinary people. Therefore, they too are able to admire beautiful women and even often do stupid things. Wendy began and once again looked critically at her reflection. Kelly decided it was time for her to intervene. "Mom, stop complaining. You really do look amazing." And I got a wink from my companion. And she continued to push her line. "Aunt Wendy, all that's left to do is match your hair to your closet. I saw a nice cream blouse with a blue velvet skirt. It'll look very harmonious. But please don't wear any jackets or ridiculous costume jewelry. You'll ruin everything." Wendy waved her hands helplessly. "I wanted to complete the brooch set with her and Ruby. It's a piece of jewelry I inherited from my grandmother." Owen looked at the woman with judgment. "And it would be acceptable if they were sapphires or emeralds. But rubies are too flashy. And then today, bulky jewelry is out of style. Put your heirloom in the jewelry box." Kelly brought her gold-plated pin. It's lying there cosmetically. Wendy even flinched. "What pin? You shouldn't be overreacting. Aunt Wendy is a very stylish accessory, and such small details quite successfully fulfill the mission of the proverbial highlight. Now you'll see for yourself." Not more than half an hour passed, and Wendy already looked at her reflection in a completely different way. "Emily, you are magic. I did not even think that in just a couple of hours you can so dramatically transform a person's appearance." Kelly fixed the pin. "Emily is a true unicum. By the way, they're having their college premiere tonight. They're playing one of the lead roles." "Debutante," whispered Kelly, and Wendy shifted her gaze from the mirror to her niece. "Emily, what on earth have you been quiet about? Such an event, if I can make it, I would love to join you. It's been so long since I've been to the theater." Emily blushed and threw an angry glance in Kelly's direction. Aunt Wendy, this is just our term play. I mean, it's practically amateur level. And I'm not sure you're going to like the show. And the themes are a little shallow. The woman was puzzled. I get the impression you don't want me to be there for you. Kelly came to the rescue again. Mom doesn't really want me to, but she's afraid you'll underestimate her acting ability. Oh my God, I'm not a theater critic. I can only judge as a layman. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you later. I'm gonna be late for check-in. When did Wendy's door close? Kelly said thoughtfully. Emily, ever since you've been in our house, Mom's been unrecognizable. I get the impression that she has an admirer. Is that a bad thing? My mom's living the high life. What was your love affair with Kevin? It seemed like forever. But the man would slip up a little, and Clara would give him a hot kick in the ass. And she's alone now. What about breeding new varieties of apples, pears, and other crops? After all, according to the stories of Aunt Clara, a specialist in this case, she smirked. There are a lot of such specialists only in Tuops alone. And my mom is not used to grieving. And now David is sweating on her plantation instead of Kevin. Not a bad guy, but a little old. Honestly, I don't know how you can get married so often. Personally, I'd like to be married once and for all. Everyone wants to, but it's almost unrealistic. Take your mom, for example. She's only 42 years old. Women that age still have babies. She's doomed herself to loneliness. And there's another stereotype that needs to be broken. Commitment to one profession with such a life position can be warmed up and left at a broken trough. And what to do? Give me a hint, since you're so smart. It doesn't take much intelligence. I'll take my mother as an example again. You think she was born a complete primitive? No, Clara speaks 5 foreign languages. For almost 15 years, she taught school and then college. But one day her mother realized she didn't want to work for a degrading salary. First, she took up translations, and later she switched to the resort business with the help of her husbands. Mom built 3 outhouses, and now she has a stable and good income. Despite her positive attitude toward Aunt Clara and Emily, Kelly did not see her mother as a cheap homeowner. The rejection was so strong that the girl shrugged. Oh no, I'd rather have my mom stay on as department chair, instead of sitting next to her. The mistake is yours and your mom's. That you are far from real life? I'm just giving examples. And that doesn't mean you have to repeat my mother's path. Modern business is multifaceted. And Wendy, with her knowledge, could find a decent and very lucrative occupation. By the way, you should think about it too. Kelly hesitantly objected, I think so. Economists are needed everywhere today, she sighed. That's right. They are needed. But it's one thing to serve someone, quite another to work for yourself. She looked at her friend with an inquisitive gaze. I'm sorry to intrude on your privacy. But if I were you, I'd have tracked down my dad a long time ago. That day, if my mom finds out, she'll tear me apart like a cap, but you make sure that my mom doesn't find out. You're a big girl, and you can make your own life. You know, Emily, as a sister and a friend, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And what's stopping you? Shame and fear. Shame of imposing. And fear of being misunderstood. Not by a disheveled short haircut. Kelly, you're not really out of this world. Yeah, your dad's gonna be over the moon. That you haven't forgotten him. Men at an advanced age have a very different outlook on life. They reevaluate their priorities. Kelly cried out, mercy, my unstable mind. My brain can't process so much new information. True, I understood the main message of finding my father. The girl covered her eyes and smiled. You know, Emily, it was my dad who taught me to love sports. He did a lot for me in general. My mom was always stuck in her institute, and he took me to the skating rink. And then he left quietly. She hugged the girl. Okay, don't get too depressed. We should get ready for college. I'll admit, my inner 3 bitches had already started to kick in. Kelly decided to cheer up her relative. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. In fact, it's great to have you. Emily, you're a friend and a sister in one. Reason for your confession, and I hope you'll listen to me. Kelly had long ago willingly surrendered herself to the mercy of her companion's snoring. She tried to follow her advice because she wanted to be as confident as she was. And in just 3 years of school from the girl's best friend, she had changed a lot. Wendy noticed these changes, but considered them positive. A bright sunny day was replaced by inclement weather. Moreover, weather metamorphoses occurred with surprising speed. First, the sky darkened, then the wind came. About the same feelings raged in Emily's soul. She could barely hold back tears, despair, and spectacularly clasped hands. I knew it. My liver sensed it was going to be a total failure. Told those knuckleheads that this play would be a failure. Kelly asked, "Tell me, who are we talking about? I mean, who are these narrow-minded people? Trevor and Betty. Fucking theater people. Guys, everyone's gonna freak out about our play." She artificially executed her fellow students who took the play. She did this parody from the heart, and even with a PR person. After a short pause, the girl, as if to summarize the result, was not wrong. Indeed, the commission was at least half an hour in shock. They didn't call our performance an ugly performance for nothing. Kelly said, "Yeah, it wasn't great, but it was fun. I bet it was." Everyone in the audience was looking up with laughter. Where else can you see a wolf on a scooter and a family? I'm not talking about the grandmother and her hilarious arrangement of a bun named Boo Boo. But the one that struck me the most, in my opinion, was Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, you had to pull off a fairy tale plot like that. Kelly stroked her foot on her arm. But your bunny looked pretty good against that background. Yeah, it was a good play. It's just that your directors were a little ahead of the curve in some places. She sighed. I realize you're coming on to me, but in my opinion, I think you've gone completely overboard. And we'll have to take the exam separately. The board made it pretty clear to us that we mutilated the classics. They definitely liked The Wolf Investigator, but they said that the topical theme should have been reflected in a different way. We got the appeal, not the denial. It's a good thing Wendy wasn't here. Our art would have made her hair stand on end. They're no good to themselves because it's hardly your fault. The girl cried. You're wrong, Kelly. The failure was my fault. It was my idea. But those two dumb-ass morons turned it 180 degrees, and it was obvious at the dress rehearsal. But we were all rusty. We wanted to see how our professors would teach. To my mind, that's exactly what happened. Were you able to get the effect you wanted from Kelly? How about if you get creative that way? I can see what would happen. It can't, don't. One experiment is enough. Are you right? I think I should stop here. But that doesn't mean it's game over. Kelly looked anxiously at her friend, wondering if she was up to something else. The girl was suddenly amused. You know, I realized that I'm a lousy actress, to put it mildly. And what's the point of pushing in the background? I'm gonna try a new role. You want to drop out, but you've only got a little time left. No, sis, I'm not dropping out. I could use an extra diploma. I'm going to study to be a makeup artist. By the way, very rare and in demand today profession. Such specialists are needed not only in the theater and cinema. You can still make fabulous money in the ritual services. Kelly pulled her eyes out in fright. You're crazy to do makeup on a dead person. It's totally lame. You don't understand this market. We're not gonna make it in this market. Kelly didn't have time to digest the information she'd gotten, but her friend pushed her painfully in the side. I think we're being followed. Tom, like two idiots, Kelly carefully turned his head. Who's following? You imagined it? No, it's definitely following us. Remember the two guys out front? I think that's them. It's definitely them. Kelly nodded affirmatively, because she remembered the faces of the guys who had toured them. But it was still light, and there were people walking in the park. So the girlfriends also decided to relax a bit and talk at the same time. But when the weather started to deteriorate rapidly, all the walkers scattered to their homes. Kelly asked anxiously what we were going to do. They're following us. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Let's pretend nothing's going on for now. I say we take a sharp turn back. It'll surprise them. And then we've got to get out of the park, and we're in a cul-de-sac. Good for you, girlfriend. I hadn't really thought of that. Make it 3 more. Let's turn around. Aha. And if anything, I start yelling like Aunt Clara taught me. What happened next was more like a freak accident. The girls turned around on cue, which puzzled the guys. One of them stepped forward to offer his help, but a shrieking squeal of a knee put the companions in a state of stupor. Emily followed her friend's example, and the guys were frightened, even more clamped with fear. The girl's eyes squealed selflessly, not noticing what was going on around her. They were replenished after someone started shaking them by the shoulders. That brought them to their senses. When Kelly opened her eyes, she saw a guy who looked familiar. But since the environment was not conducive to memories, she screamed again. The young man asked loudly, "Calm down. What happened? Can you explain?" Kelly looked to the side where the two guys who had been following them were still standing in confusion. The stranger who had brought Kelly to her senses repeated his question. "Someone explain what happened here." One of the guys came out of his tetanic state. "Not crazy. We were just walking along, minding our own business, not bothering anybody. They came at us and started yelling like they were being stabbed." Emily raised her voice. "That's not true. You were following us. How do we know what's on your mind?" The guy retorted resentfully, "Who cares about you? We were just going about our business. And when those fools turned around and thought they needed help, they started squealing." Things were heating up again. The EMTs decided to separate the warring parties. Let's assume there was a misunderstanding. A couple of stalkers headed for the exit, but they went no more than 50 meters as the one who called the girlfriends. The crazies turned around. Such lunatics should be isolated so they don't throw themselves at people. The few gawkers who had escaped all quietly dispersed at the shouts. Only the guy who seemed unfamiliar remained. The girls silently looked at each other, and they summarized the day. "Yeah, we sure didn't have a good day today," Kelly added, "but in my opinion, the second part turned out much cooler than your reporting performance." A young man intervened in the discussion. "Girls, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm ready to escort you home." Emily sneered, "Of course. Is it possible for two crazy people to walk around town?" "I didn't say that." The guy looked at Kelly. "You know, I recognized you right away." The girl had already fully recovered and even smiled. "Your face looked familiar to me too. But I can't remember where I've seen you before. Don't you remember the incident at the market? About 3 years ago, it was in the spring. I remembered you and your aunt very well. They took us to the police." Kelly was jumping up and down with joy. "That's it, I remember you, Max." The young man jokingly replied, "That's right." Emily silently watched the meeting of two old acquaintances. Max and Kelly chatted on the way home, and she didn't even have a chance to get a word in edgewise. She didn't try to absorb the meaning of their conversation, because her mind gave the thought from the looks of such a quiet girl, how quickly the guys handled. Her mother talked about the adventure at the market, but did not describe the fellows who had come to her and Kelly's rescue. The girl suddenly felt very irritated and turned to her friend. "Kelly, good kindly, let's go home. I'm going to sleep right here." There was already waiting for them at home. "Wendy, where have you girls been? I was getting worried." Kelly beat her sister to the punch. "Mom's fine. We just went for a little walk with my foot after the play. And you know who we met?" "I don't know, daughter. Remember, Aunt Clara came to visit us, and we were selling at the market." "How could I not remember? You got into a fight, and I had to drag you out of the police station." "Aha. And there was your former student, Max. Can you believe it, Mom? He's the one we met today." Kelly was glowing with joy. Wendy was pleasantly surprised, too. Yeah, amazing things happen in life. The daughter and her mother were having a nice conversation, but they'd forgotten about Emily. What hurt her most was that her aunt didn't even remember her premiere. That night, jealousy and envy tied Emily's soul into one strong knot. Like any mother, Wendy was worried about her daughter. Rapidly developing romance of her daughter with Max turned into a major problem for her. First and foremost, the parent was concerned about the age difference. Max was older than Kelly by 5 years, which means that he had a completely different view of relationships with girls. Several times, the woman tried to remind her daughter to be careful in her relationships with men. "Kelly, at your age, it is very easy to make mistakes." The girl defiantly objected to her mother. "So you are my mother, you advise me to wait another 10 years, but who will need, as Aunt Clara put it, overripe and fruity? Kelly, don't exaggerate. That's not what I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you that it's not uncommon for girls in love to lose their ability to reason, and then they pay for it. Wendy, she was embarrassed to talk openly about certain things with her daughter. But Emily did not pick up expressions and always chopped from the shoulder. Since in this matter, she was completely solidarity aunt. She, too, has often commented on Kelly and Max's romantic encounters. All guys are nice at first, but once they get their way, they won't even wave goodbye. The sad thing is, girlfriend, there are often consequences after a touching love affair. And it's not only the broken heart of the girl, but children out of wedlock. Emily spoke with pathos, and Wendy blushed at her remarks. Under the pressure of two women at once, Kelly was losing it, but she didn't give up. You two are in cahoots, aren't you? My Max is not so decent and not capable of doing bad things. Emily had gotten comfortable with the role of mentor. How naive are you, girlfriend? You should listen to what your elders tell you. I mean, you're only 2 years older than me, and listen to you, so you know everything and know everything. Then how come you don't have a boyfriend yet? Emily glared at you. I just didn't throw myself at the first guy I saw. The argument was beginning to take on the tones of a conflict, and Wendy decided to have her say, "Girls, stop fighting. We don't need to get into a fight over a disagreement." Although Kelly had always had a docile disposition and often gave in to one-liners, this time, she was being pretty aggressive. I'm sick of having a babysitter sticking her nose into everything I do. I'd rather have her watch her own back, but she's talking out of her ass. Do you believe her, Mom? Kelly, calm down. You can't do that. Emily is our guest, so let her behave like one. She's used to being the boss around here. She wouldn't shut up and started insulting us. She's a hysterical little brat. And then it came back. And you're an artist from a burned-out theater. Wendy had never raised her voice to her daughter in her life, and now she's yelling at her daughter. Stop this outrage right now. What are you making a scene for? The girls went their separate ways, but each had his own opinion. Kelly thought that her friend had made the scene out of jealousy, and she was not far from the truth. And the knot in Emily's soul has already coiled strings of hatred, and the thought ripples in the sand. What kind of trash? I already think she's going to tear her hair out on herself. The girls didn't leave their rooms until the evening, and Wendy tried to find the perfect way to reconcile the parties. Emily also refused. So the first attempt ended in failure. In the morning at breakfast, the girls also looked at each other angrily. Wendy made several more attempts, but they also failed. Then she decided to give up on the girls' weight loss. Let the grown-ups sort it out for themselves. I have enough to do without them. Indeed, Wendy was not to love tragedies. In recent months in their institute began to occur unpleasant changes. Yesterday, the teaching staff learned about the upcoming optimization. They were explained that these changes are due to the fact that their educational institution will now be supervised by a completely different department. But the head of the department was 100% sure that no one would cut her down. Only idiots would think of closing the leading departments in the institute. Unfortunately, such idiots were found. Wendy had heard about it from the rector. Simon, as a young lady, modestly dimming his eyes, began from afar. Wendy, my dear, you are aware of the transformations that are taking place in our institute. The woman answered briefly yes. The rector is in his supervisor's chair. Unfortunately, it is not an easy process, and it involves some unpleasantness. The subordinates decided to help the head of Simon. Tell me directly about the coming trouble. The man exhaled. If you yourself insist, I will say, the leadership from above decided, and he knows better, that it makes no sense to keep several specialized educational institutions on the balance sheet. So they decided to disband our institute. Not exactly. Dear Wendy, in this case, the word condense would be more appropriate. The man is nasty, he giggled and mimed with his hands. What does this compaction process look like? Something like this. But the core departments will remain, if I understand you correctly. My department is in no danger of closing. Simon was completely confused. He took a handkerchief out of his pocket and began to rub his forehead vigorously. The higher authorities decided to merge the chemistry departments of our institute and the state university. But it's wrong. We have the biggest competition every year. If we reduce the number of places, it will increase even more. What can we do, Wendy? We're just a bunch of little pigs. It's not up to us to decide what's best. Simon completed the unpleasant mission and quickly calmed down. A confident and even haughty note appeared in his voice. I put you on notice. The woman was indignant. So you're just putting me out on the street. After 17 years on the job. Wendy, why are you being sentimental now? Nobody's kicking you out. You'll be a regular teacher, but that's just for a while. Then maybe a good position will come along. All right, I'll take the teaching job. The chief immediately picked up on it. Don't be in a hurry to accept, because there's only a part-time position available at the moment. The woman felt bad then and took 2 deep breaths. She slowly got up from her chair. She really wanted to say everything she thought of him to this acolyte's face. But Wendy was not the kind of woman to give in to emotion. She confidently refused the chief's offer, and Simon offered the part-time job to someone else. But no one would take it, and you expect me to take it. I mean, that's what you were counting on. You thought I'd jump like a dog on a bone. But no, I'm turning down your tempting offer. I think I'll let someone very close to you take the part-time job. Who do you have in mind? Wendy? The ones who come to your appointments with a tube of Vaseline. Simon shrieked. I don't get the implication. Ask your secretary, she'll explain it to you clearly. Wendy carefully closed the door behind her. At the secretary's questioning look, she said the chief was digesting new information. I advise you not to disturb him. The girl darted her eyes away. She didn't understand why the always poised chair of the chemistry department was acting so defiantly today. Wendy didn't know what was happening to her. But after she had said everything in the eyes of the chief, she became euphoric. However, it did not last long. After awakening consciousness, the woman began to worry about a thought. What should we do with the tape now? She could not find an answer to this question. At home, another surprise awaited her in the form of a note on the table from her niece. Aunt Wendy for me. Don't worry, I've moved into the dormitory. The woman attributed Emily's sudden departure to last night's scandal. Oh my God, what kind of day is this? Not enough trouble at work. The girls had a falling out. That same night, Wendy went to the theater college dormitory, but they were surprised to find out who she was looking for. She had been expelled from the college for truancy and poor academic performance. She picked up her papers as recently as last week. The relative was shocked to hear the news. Maybe you can tell me where to find her? The woman who introduced herself as the commandant looked at the visitors with distrust. Who would you be to her? An aunt, you might say. Mom and I are third cousins. Why do you ask? The receptionist looked at her strangely again. No sooner had your niece disappeared than her friends and acquaintances came here in droves. She's a sociable girl. Who did she borrow money from? She promised someone a lot of money. So I'm looking for the girl. Really, you and your aunt haven't come before. I understand that all interested parties should not talk about your visit. That or not. Wendy was shocked by the news, which she immediately shared with Kelly. She, too, took a long time to come to her senses. Mom, but it can't be. I've been with her most of the time. I never noticed anything like this about her. It wasn't until Max and I started dating. It was like she was switched. Switched. Wendy rushed to her room surprised by her mother's behavior. Kelly followed her. Mom jumped up so quickly. The woman's performance dug through the drawers and shelves of the closet. Mom, tell me, what are you looking for? Maybe I can help you? No, daughter. No one can help us now. The woman sank down on the bed without strength and came in laughing hysterically like a nice girl from Tuops. She lived with us for 3 years, drank and ate delicious food, and took both. The laughter was replaced by tears. Wendy was not just crying, but sobbing. Amy Kelly tried to calm her mother, but her entreaties had the opposite effect. With great difficulty, the girl forced the woman to drink sedative drops. The medicine worked quickly. Wendy, still sobbing, howled, but was already able to speak calmly. Kelly, you and I are complete fools. The girl corrected her mother in the feminine would be correct. It's the right word for us. Emily cleaned us out. My jewelry and my grandmother's choker brooch are gone. No money either. Considering I'm out of work now and I know you and I are gonna live. Mom, what are you talking about? Just yesterday you were talking about grand plans, and today you're out of a job. That's right, my girl. There's a change at the Institute. They're closing my department. I gotta find something. You mean like a dry cleaner or something? Wendy didn't sound optimistic, and Kelly looked bitterly at her mother. She knew they were in for a rough time, and mentally sent rocks from the sky and other unpleasantness down on Nina's head with her sadness. She decided to share with Max. Of course, she didn't say anything about her intentions to the girls and her mother. Max was well versed in the intricacies of modern business. He had graduated from a commercial university in the northern capital and now worked in a large construction company. Max tried several times to enlighten Kelly in these matters, but she could not remember even the basics. Max, I beg you not to waste your time. My brain refuses to accept such knowledge. I get a headache right away. Then why did you go to economics? What kind of specialist will you be? The girl laughed cheerfully. Anything? I'll sit quietly like a mouse in a small office and calculate wages. A person should strive for the highest goal and to achieve it to use everything to the maximum. Max, I used to have my mom say that too. For many years she followed this rule and ended up with nothing. They were strolling through the city after the movie, and this news made the young man freeze in place. Like nothing. You mean to tell me that Wendy no longer teaches at the Institute? That's exactly what I'm saying. Of course, she's been offered a job, but the terms were so humiliating that she turned it down. Yeah, tragic, you might say. No, Max, that's an incomplete picture. We were also robbed. Did you report it to the police? No, Mom doesn't want to. She's in the habit of protecting her reputation. The point is, we'd probably been robbed. Emily, you must remember her. We were in the park together then. Max stretched out uncertainly. The young man fell back into prostration. But Kelly did not find his behavior strange. A few minutes passed and he came to his senses. Of course I remember your sister. Funny girl. You know, a few days ago she and I were chatting online, and she mentioned she was going on a trip. Yeah, well, Emily knows how to spend other people's money. Kelly, maybe it's not her. I'd like to think so, but there's no one else. I wonder why you're defending her. I'm all about justice. The easiest thing to do is to blame the person. What about Wendy's employment? I'm sure I'll think of something. I can't leave my fiancé's mom in the lurch. Kelly noticed that Max was trying to avoid a topic that was unpleasant for him, and she did not prevent it, because she herself did not want to bring up Emily. She found the hint of a quick wedding more enticing than discussing the theft in their apartment. Max, you're so sure my mom would agree. The guy laughed at Kelly. I'm going to propose to you, not your mom. But you're going to have to wait a little while. I've got a very risky venture, but if it works out, I'll be a millionaire in no time. Max, maybe it's better not to take the risk. As a famous French woman used to say, he who doesn't take risks doesn't drink champagne. Did you know that Madame was the widow of a banker? No, I don't. And please don't prophesize a widow's fate for me. Is that an unfortunate example? Like most young girls, Kelly was in love with Max. He quickly became her biggest idol, and she tried to overlook his flaws. The main disadvantage of the guy was his habit of giving out promises, but he very rarely kept them. So it happened in the situation with Wendy. The future son-in-law could well assist the woman in employment, but he forgot about his promise to help the mother of the bride after 5 minutes. Kelly decided not to remind him mentally. She reassured herself, it's not a big deal. Everyone has flaws. Max will get better with time, I'm sure of it. And I can help my mom myself. The girl remembered Emily's advice to ask her father for help. She did not say a word to her mother and went to the dacha to Grandma Vera. The old woman was genuinely pleased to see her granddaughter. Kelly, you can't imagine how happy I am. You've forgotten all about me. Even stopped calling. The girl felt the paint sticking to her face. Grandma recently had so much to do. So many different events happened. Not all of them pleasant. Vanessa wasn't even surprised. I had a bad feeling. Let me guess. Trouble happened with Wendy. Kelly couldn't contain her surprised gasp. Grandma, you're a psychic. You're allowed to make appointments for money, and she's a glue forest, so spit it out. What happened there? The girl briefly described the problem and at the end added, I do not want to impose, but maybe Dad would not refuse to help us. They remembered when they were in a hurry. The granddaughter looked at her grandmother judgmentally. Mom doesn't know I'm here. I never said anything about my plans, so it's your initiative. The girl nodded in affirmation, and Vanessa, after a short silence, voiced her verdict. It's commendable that you're starting to live with your own mind. It means that you're all grown up and can make your own decisions. It's easy to meet your father. The woman winked enigmatically at her granddaughter. You, Kelly, are in the right place at the right time. The girl clapped her hands. Daddy is here visiting you. You guessed it. He should be here soon. A friend invited him. They're working out some important issues. Simon was as happy as his daughter about the unexpected meeting. He couldn't take his eyes off the girl. You're all grown up now, Kelly. How many years have we not seen you? Daddy, that's a pop quiz. I can't tell you exactly. Probably 10 years, maybe all of them. 12. 11 will be a month from now. I remember that day well. Anyway, let's not talk about the sad stuff. You better tell me. You haven't given up on biathlon. Remember when I took you to the sports school? Dad, I remember everything, but big sport is not for me. He told me to evaluate my abilities. When I played for the school, I was successful. Simon got sad. You don't have to go on. I know what you're going to say. When I went to college, I didn't have time for sports. Kelly countered not exactly. In the winter, I regularly train and even compete for the institute. But this is a completely different level. The girl waited for her father to ask about her mother. But the man asked his daughter about anything, but kept silent about the main thing. It was as if he was afraid of hurting a sore wound. Vanessa watched her son's torment from the sidelines and decided to intervene. You're acting like a boy. It's not your age to hide in the bushes. You were all over me yesterday asking about Wendy. Now you're wandering around. The man tried to stop the mother. Mom, all in good time. Let me talk to my daughter. I'm not interrupting. You don't have to talk when there's serious business to be done. The trouble your Wendy's in is she's too proud to ask for help. The man raised his eyebrows in surprise. I called her about a month ago, and she said everything was fine. It was Kelly's turn to be surprised at her father's words. You called your mom. What's so surprising about that? We call regularly, and I've sent money over the years. Unfortunately, I couldn't get here sooner. Why not? The man smirked. My job is so secret, you might say. Simon laughed lightly. Kelly looked at her father and tried to digest what she had just learned from him. Daddy, can you tell me why you left Mom and me? Who told you such nonsense? I didn't leave you. Mom decided we needed to be apart. Sometimes people live together for a long time and then suddenly realize they're strangers. So I left quietly, without a fight. I thought it would be for a short time, but it turned out to be years. So you have another family. I have no one. I'm a one lover. Simon talked for a long time about his foreign life, and his daughter looked at him with admiration. When Vanessa began to blow her nose outside the window, she began to chew on her granddaughter's right. Kelly, you have to go or your mother will be worried. I understand that you didn't warn her that you were coming to me. You didn't warn your grandmother. The girl started to pack without any desire to go, and her father went to see her off when she got on the train. He said confidently, Daughter, now everything will be different for us. I'll help you if Mom doesn't refuse to accept my help. Kelly's soul was struggling with the most contradictory feelings. She resented her parents for not being able to keep the family together because of their own ambitions. But at the same time, she felt sorry for them because they had robbed themselves of so many years of happiness. She came home devastated. Wendy fiddled in the kitchen and asked in a colorless voice, Where did you disappear for so long? Max called me. He lost you too. I was at my grandmother's cottage. The connection's bad there. Why did you suddenly take off? Couldn't you have called your grandmother? Wendy was reading to her daughter, monotonously, like she was doing a boring chore. And Kelly suddenly realized that that was the reality, and that her mother was used to following rules she'd made up herself. In the shower began to rise again in full growth. The question why? Wendy shuddered in surprise when her daughter asked Mommy, "Please don't make it seem like you're busy with an important matter." "Kelly, why are you talking to me like that? I have my reasons. Today I met with Daddy, and from him I learned a lot of interesting things." The plate flew out of the woman's hands and shattered on the tile floor. Wendy wasn't so confident anymore, and her voice was trembling. "Herman is here, and what did he tell you about me?" "About you?" "Nothing. Daddy talked about himself, about working in a foreign country and living alone there." "Mom, why didn't you go with him? Why didn't you tell me anything about his calls?" The woman sat down on the edge of the chair. "I'm sorry, my daughter. I thought it was for the best. For whom it's best, only for you. Daddy asked you to come with him, and all you had on your mind was your work. Your department always came first. And now what?" Wendy cried. "At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. I talked Herman out of going on the trip, and he wouldn't listen to me." The quiet crying turned to sobs, and Kelly began to soothe her mother. "Okay, Mom, don't cry. You can't change the past, but you can change tomorrow. Dad promised to help us. By the way, you didn't tell me anything about him sending money on a regular basis. You just turned me against my father, and that's very cruel. That's what I resent most of all. Through a woman's tears or the money I didn't spend. I've been saving all these years. I thought it would be a wedding present. Well, you collected it, and Emily got it. Mom, I wonder if we'll ever meet again. What kind of eyes will that bitch look at us with? I think people like that have no shame and no conscience. And Wendy wasn't wrong because I never worry about nothing. She not once in her early girlhood emptied the purse of her own mother, who was embarrassed to make a fuss about it on the snap, was bred by a cheeky girl of school friends and later college classmates. The seizure of the cash from Emily's aunt did not count as theft. This procedure she referred to as temporary borrowing. For almost a year, the young relative disappeared unknown where and with whom. And then, as if nothing had happened, showed up at her aunt's house, but Kelly met her. "Emily, what are you doing here?" But Emily wasn't deterred by the cold reception. "I wanted to apologize. Where's Aunt Wendy?" "My mom's gone. She and my dad went overseas." "I wonder what you want to apologize for." "Probably for ripping us off and not even bothering with Hugh's rare brooch." Kelly's rant didn't hurt the one-armed woman as much as anything else. She opened her valise-shaped purse and pulled out the antique jewelry. "It would be a valuable piece, but it's just trinkets and baubles. I'll return it safe and sound." For about a minute they stood in silence. Kelly was about to close the door in front of her, but Emily slipped her foot in the doorway. "You're going to keep me on the doorstep. We're related, no matter how you put it." Aunt Wendy wouldn't allow herself to be so careless with her guests. Kelly was always lost in the insolence of other people, and she knew it well enough to ignore her hostess's confusion. She entered the apartment in a hostess-like manner. "Kelly, you don't know how exhausting this is for me, do you? During this time, I first tried to get settled in Boston, even contacted your Max, so that he could give me addresses where I could stay. Then I was advised to go to Denver. In short, I'm like that traveler frog. I've been everywhere and seen everything. At least I get tea in this house." Kelly offered helplessly. "Come to the kitchen. My supplies are meager. I can only offer pâté. My parents are away, and I have to eat alone. I don't feel like eating. So when I'm alone, I try to buy less groceries." Emily hid her sandwich with gusto. "Why so sad? And why alone?" Kelly blushed. "Max and I are getting married soon. My parents promised to come, and Aunt Clara, too." She set aside the sandwich she hadn't eaten. "What a great trip. I'll even get a chance to meet my mother." To be honest, she and I got caught up a bit. Apparently, Aunt Wendy complained about me, but I only borrowed your money for a while. It was just sitting in the soup, sitting around. And money's supposed to work. But you know me, I'll pay you back. The appearance of the soul did not promise any joy, but Kelly could not put her on the street. In her thoughts, she cherished the hope that the guest period of a distant relative would end quickly. But it turned out differently. She stayed for a long time. One afternoon, Kelly's eyes began to slip. She tried to fight the drowsiness, but to no avail. Emily noticed the expectant mother's distress. The idea of looking at you hurts. Sitting there with your nose turned up, Max immediately jumped up and obligingly asked his wife to come along. "I'll see you in bed." "Woman, please." Still looked at the loved ones. "I am still able to think. You treat me like an incapacitated entity." The man kissed his wife on the forehead. "It's not like an amorphous being. It's a real object with a beautiful belly. No one doubts your mental abilities either. But Emily, you're right. You really need to rest." "Max, but we haven't solved your problem. An hour or an hour and a half won't change anything. You get some rest, and Emily and I will discuss all the financial options." "Okay, I give up." The woman stood up with the help of her husband, but immediately clutched her stomach. The man anxiously asked what's wrong. Kelly smiled. "False alarm. It's just that our baby has been very restless lately. You said you were having a girl." She looked at the happy Kelly with hateful eyes. But as soon as the woman looked up, she smiled, although it's right, all moms call babies. Pardon me for being uneducated. With each passing day, she was more and more jealous of Kelly, and her friend's happiness was becoming a lump in her throat. She had to make an incredible effort to hold herself politely in the presence of a pregnant woman. This was necessary to realize bold plans. Emily's unremarkable brain. For a long time, it searched for the perfect way to realize it. And at last it was found. And not herself was surprised at the simplicity of the solution. "All I have to do is get Max on my side." Immediately after her epic comeback, Emily was in limbo. She was afraid her in-laws would kick her out the door, and rightly so, because they'd stolen a decent amount of money from her. But Wendy was a woman of intelligence, and during her brief visit, pretended that nothing had happened. When she tried to assure her that she would repay the debt, the aunt calmly replied, "We can wait." Emily even collected money for a while, but then she thought that she could take her time. Her relatives did not rush her, and she finally calmed down. And why worry if her life is quite successful? After a short search, she found her dream job. Max helped her get a job as a makeup artist in a dramatic theater. True, the salary there was so meager that the girl began to think about leaving. But Kelly's husband intervened again, and it's never too late to pay off. Work in the theater is prestigious, and it is not difficult to find additional income if desired. Emily has also not once faced the fact that Max is not accustomed to fulfill his promises. At that critical moment, she didn't believe him either. "Max, aren't you the one who's going to get me this job?" The young man didn't even raise an eyebrow. "Of course I am. Who else would help you? Unfortunately, my wife and her mom don't believe in me, but I'll prove it to them anyway." Emily did not want to listen to lengthy speeches narcissistic egotist, and she unapologetically interrupted him. "Max doesn't bore me with long speeches. I'd rather be specific about the case." The man staggered a little, but answered. "An acquaintance of mine successfully got a job in a firm that provides funeral services. You're a great makeup artist. You're the kind of specialist that's in demand these days." "Thank you. I'll think about it." "What's to think about?" "You know, Max, it's one thing to work with living people, and quite another to do makeup on the dead." The man has regained his old confidence. "That's Emily. This kind of work pays a lot of money. And you know that money makes all the difference these days." After that common phrase, Max just kind of slumped. She didn't realize it was her time. In order not to frighten the victim, she indifferently asked, "You also have ideas, but no money." "And I understood you correctly, I guessed. I'm not an artist at all lately. I'll tell you a secret. Tried some options, but at once burned out." Not in a connoisseur's tone. "My opinion is this. If you're unlucky in one thing, you should stop and think about something else. Emily, I appreciate you being willing to listen to me. It's impossible to talk to Kelly on this topic at all. She can't even hear it. Can you elaborate on what your young wife doesn't want to hear about in the business? I mean, she doesn't trust me, so she won't give me money. I have no money of my own, and my parents are simple farmers. It's not hard to guess what you've already asked for. Kelly gave it to you, but you've been squandering the money." "I guessed." The man's heavy sigh confirmed Emily's guess, but she decided to support the loser. "Just keep your spirits up. We'll figure something out. As they say, I'll make it up to you. You make it up to me." That is to say, bash to bash. Max's support, and he decided to thank the girl. It took the man only 2 days to solve the issue of her placement in a firm of ritual services. Soon Max already felt as an associate, and began not only to listen to her advice, but also to fulfill it. A little more than a year later, such cooperation, young man, in addition to gratitude, began to feel tenants and quite other feelings. Emily understood this and used her sister's husband to the fullest. But Kelly did not guess that the conspirators are preparing behind her back grandiose plans to enrich themselves at someone else's expense. A short rest helped the expectant mother to regain her strength. The young woman tiptoed to the kitchen and said loudly, "I caught you in the act." "What are you broadcasting about?" She clutched her heart. "Kelly, you can't scare people like that." My heart almost stopped. "Oh, I'm sorry, girlfriend. I didn't mean to." "So what are we talking about?" Max gave Emily an expressive look, and she got right to the point. "Kelly, your husband told me in detail about his project, and I think his plan deserves attention." The mom-to-be interrupted her friend. "And this is Max's third project in 2 years, and all 3 have failed miserably. It's a good thing my parents don't know where the money they gave me for the wedding went. By the way, my husband blew my maternity money too. I've already told him to take out loans if he's on fire in one place." Max finally decided to have his say. "Kelly, but you know what interest you'll have to pay, and why are you pulling away from me? I mean, we're a family, so we have to work things out together." "Yes, I agree with such a statement of the question. But I do not agree that we have to risk for 2 dubious projects." The woman turned to her friend, "And don't you know what Max suggested?" "No, to sell the salon my dad bought me. At this rate, it'll soon come down to the apartment." "No, Max, think of something simpler and more realistic." Max looked at the leg in a belittling way, but it shook its head negatively. Later, she advised the man to take his time. "I've studied Lenka well. She's a detachable person. Adjusted time, her own project. A child will be born. Kelly will be busy being a mother and kinder. Remember my word. She'll decide to sell this worthless salon herself." And so it happened. After Nancy was born, the young mother forgot all about her little business. She hardly ever visited the photo parlor, and things went from bad to worse there. One night at dinner, the woman said firmly, "I've decided to sell my business before I go completely bankrupt. I don't want to work at a loss." The buyer was found quickly, since the salon was in the center of town. After the deal was finalized, Kelly told her husband, "Max, I've already wired the money to your account. Let it be my birthday present to you, but remember that I'm so kind." For the last time, the man kissed his wife. "I get it. I swear you and I will soon be cruising the Mediterranean on our own yacht." Little Nancy looked at her happy father's eccentricity and flooded with laughter. But Max again failed to live up to the trust. The money went to nothing. Kelly was shredding cabbage with a knife with exasperation, preoccupied with her own unhappy thoughts. Nancy asked her several times to read her a new book, but she answered, barely restraining herself. "Daughter, you see, Mommy has no time. She has to make soup." But the little girl couldn't calm down. "And you and I will eat soup together. And maybe Aunt Emily will come to visit us?" The little girl jumped joyfully on one leg. "Healthy kids. They always bring me candy or chocolate bars. That's why you have bad teeth. You should eat less sweets. My dad says kids should eat nothing but candy." "Your dad just made a bad joke." Kelly threw the cabbage into the pot and sat down on the stool. "While the soup is boiling, let me read to you." Nancy held out a book with colorful illustrations, but at that moment the bell rang. She wanted to rush to the door, but Kelly put her finger to her lips and tiptoed into the hallway. The bell rang 3 times, and the woman opened the door with a sigh of relief. "Why didn't you call right away? You know that I'm all on edge. I'm even afraid to go to the store." Emily slipped into the apartment. "Did you have company again?" "Yeah, they tried to come over last night, but I didn't open the door. They texted me this morning. The guests asked if they were threatening." "Yeah, I don't know how to get out of it." "What does Max say? How does he explain these attacks on his family?" "He's a man. He's supposed to protect you and Nancy." When she heard her name, the girl ran up to her aunt with a book. "This isn't my daddy's book. The guests marveled, and what does it say about your daddy? How he defeated all the supervillains. Did the women look at that? Yeah, Kelly did. So I'm thinking about doing something. I don't know yet. I'm gonna call my parents. They won't leave us in the lurch. Emily pulled her eyes out in surprise. What about Max? Are you really going to leave your husband at such a critical moment? You do realize what these comrades will do to them, the brew in the pot boiled and spilled on the stove. Kelly, and cussed. Damn it, now I'll have to clean the stove a second time. The woman added heat and turned sharply to her friend. Emily, my child's life is more important to me right now. Max has put us in a dangerous position with his dealings. I don't even know where he's hiding. He's borrowed money from people. He took out loans from banks. What the hell was he thinking? Len, it happens to everybody. He's your husband. You know, Emily's been coming around more and more lately. I think my marriage was the biggest mistake I ever made. I mean, how could I have thought that a manly exterior could hide a coward and a bum? Kelly, wait, don't get too excited. Look, what if we tried talking to these assholes, rather than talking to them? But ask them for a reprieve? Kelly laughed. So you're suggesting I take on my husband's debts? But no. The unexpected woman froze in the middle of the kitchen. She stood in one position for a long time, then looked at her friend. Emily, tell me honestly, why are you crying so hard for Max? What is your interest? The guest did not expect a direct question and laughed nervously. What is this absurd suspicion? What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly why you are always hanging around my husband, Annie. I do not think I'm smarter than others. I've noticed you making advances before, but it was kind of embarrassing to say it out loud. Now it's kind of convenient. You could say, finita la commedia. As a former theatergoer, you should be familiar with that expression. Emily smirked. And on what occasion did you use it now, Emily? But you're a smart woman, and you understand everything perfectly well. And I'm even sure you know where my husband is hiding. Well, tell him I won't pay anything for him. And I'm filing for a dissolution of marriage tomorrow. I'm sick of this. Emily had never seen her friend in such a state before. She pressed her lips together resentfully. Well, you know what, friend? When it feels like it, you gotta go to church. Emily, why don't you go there too? You've got a lot of sins piling up, and you haven't paid off an old debt, by the way. The guest jerked like she'd been electrocuted. But Kelly went on and added the cherry on top, so to speak. I haven't forgotten how you tried to get my husband into your bed. These words Kelly said in a whisper so little Nancy wouldn't hear. Emily turned around and sang with undisguised anger. Who cares about your husband? A loser daddy. And back then, we just wanted to play a little joke on you. Just to shake things up. It was a good one. Kelly opened the door carefully. Nancy came running out of the room with a loud scream. Aunt Emily, you're leaving. Kelly slammed the door shut. Emily, you're going to have to wait with us. I don't want you to run into those types. The relationship between the friends had been soured for a long time, but neither woman had decided to break up because of the many things they had in common. When Kelly noticed that her friend had views on her husband, she silently packed her things and put them in the hallway. She understood without a word. She didn't show up at their house for 2 years. And when Max got into big trouble, Kelly called her herself. That night, they sat in the kitchen together. But each had her own thoughts. Late that night, Emily hailed a cab and got a cold one. After saying goodbye, she left. She had rented half a house somewhere in the country and even planned to buy the property. But she never invited Kelly to visit her. The next morning, the debt collectors showed up again. They were banging on the door. Kelly and Nancy, breathless, trembled. The woman coaxed her daughter, "Don't be afraid, my dear. This will all be over soon. We'll go to Grandma and Grandpa's tomorrow." But Kelly had to postpone the trip because of her husband's death. Kelly called her and said in a tearful voice, "Kelly, be strong." The native woman screamed, "Don't tell me what happened, Max." He crashed. My condolences. The room rocked like the deck of a ship in a storm. Kelly forgot about creditors and threatening phone calls. A smiling Max stood before her eyes. Nancy tugged on her arm. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Our daddy's sick. She cradled the baby to her chest and sat like that until Emily arrived. "Kelly, do you have to go to the lineup?" "That's what the coroner said. Let's take Nancy to my friend's house. We'll go to the morgue. I'm warning you right away, it's gonna be a hell of a sight." The words were true. Kelly fainted when she saw her husband's body on display. But she was able to tell the coroner, "Yes, that's my husband. He has a tattoo of my name on his arm and a scratch on his wedding ring." Max was buried in a closed casket. A few friends came to say goodbye to him, but his parents didn't come. They explained their absence. "Kelly, you were unwell, and I decided to talk to Max's parents myself. You know his father is a heart patient, so I advised them not to come. They'll come over later and hold their son's graveside service." The day after the funeral, Kelly and her daughter left for her parents' house. For almost 5 years, they lived in Italy, where Liam had a business. Wendy pruned their rose garden. After moving to Italy, she became interested in flower farming. This hobby sometimes reached the point of fanaticism. Simon often complained to his daughter Kelly, "You would do something about her mother, because she rushes from one extreme to another. She was obsessed with chemistry, and now she's crazy about flowers. Daddy, you can forgive her little foibles." The man sighed. "Do I have an election? After all, you women drink the ropes out of us, and we rejoice." After a 10-year separation, love flared up between the parents with renewed vigor. But it was no longer a youthful passion, but mature, like a good wine feeling. Kelly, too, began to forget the troubles little by little. Only sometimes, and at night, she dreamed of a smiling Max. Then she wanted to scream with pain, because love lurked in the corner of a woman's heart. Her father got her a job in his company, where she met Alex. The young man worked as an interpreter and was involved in important meetings as well as deal-making. Kelly never asked him about his work, as she knew about Alex's strict rules from her father. He laughed a lot himself. With Alex, Kelly felt at ease. He was not one of those who likes to throw words. But most of all, women were bribed by the fact that his words never diverged from the deed. Alex had once said, "Kelly, I think it's time for us to move to another level in our relationship. We run around like teenagers on dates." She replied, laughing, "If that's a proposal, I'll take it. But where will we formalize our relationship?" The man was surprised. "What kind of stupid questions? We'll go to our homeland. We'll sign everything and come back." When Simon learned about the decision of his daughter and coworkers, he was very happy. "Mom and I were wondering when you'd decide to get married. It's a good idea to do it at home. Why don't you come and see if the apartment's in order and Vera's grandmother? Don't forget to check on her." At first, the future newlyweds were going to go together, but just before the departure, there was a force majeure, and Alex had to be delayed by work. "I'll come on the next flight, and let Nancy go instead of me." The girl was very excited about the possibility of going on a trip. "Yay, we're going on an airplane. And then I'll get to see your wedding." Kelly corrected the girl. "There won't be a wedding. We're just gonna split up." "What do you mean, no wedding?" "I don't agree. I'm not going for nothing." "Well, we'll see where we are." There was no point in rescheduling. So Kelly and Nancy started packing. Alex drove them to the airport, waited for them to check in. "Don't you miss me?" "Just one more day, and I'll be there." Kelly waved him off, and they headed for the lounge. It was only a short walk to the plane. Kelly took a seat. Nancy nearby, the girl considered. "Mom, it's so interesting to watch people." The woman smiled. "And what is that, may I ask? So interesting." "Well, look at faces. Or rather, by facial expressions, you can tell a lot." Kelly laughed. "Are you psychic?" Nancy seemed a little offended. "Mom, what are psychics these days?" "I just like to observe. In fact, when I grow up, I'm going to be a psychologist. I think I can help people understand themselves." Kelly took a new look at her daughter. She saw that she was interested in psychology, but she thought it was just a normal teenage hobby. Any teenager changes such hobbies at the speed of light, but she didn't let her daughter finish the thought. "Mom, pay attention to that man sitting by the window. Something very important has happened in his life, and it's more good than bad." Kelly looked where her daughter was pointing. There was indeed a man sitting there, an unremarkable man of 1,000 in a suit and tie, about 50 or so years old. He wasn't reading, he wasn't on the phone, he wasn't doing anything from which to draw any conclusions. Not very interesting. Why do you say that? But it's just, look, he doesn't have much luggage, so he's traveling on business. He keeps looking out the window dreamily, like he's rushing time, and he's always wiping sweat. It's not hot in the lounge, so it's reasonable to assume that he's just scared. It might not be his first time flying, but then he wouldn't be so nervous. And if he's so scared, but he's flying anyway, then something has happened that he can't miss. One possibility, given his age, he had a grandchild. Kelly couldn't take it anymore and laughed. God, you've got a whole story to tell. If any of it's true, you shouldn't be working as a psychologist. You should be working in a police station, solving crimes. But then you're looking for someone else. Here's Mom seeing a woman. She's probably recently divorced. Kelly literally stares at the woman, but again, she doesn't see anything. But the mom here is quite plain. She doesn't wear heels because she's really uncomfortable right now. She's always fixing her hair. So she just recently got a new haircut, a little flashy, and the outfit is like screaming that she's got it all together, plus the airport. She'd obviously decided to take a change of scenery to unwind. Kelly listened and nodded. Yes, it was exactly as her daughter had described. The woman suddenly headed toward them. She really wasn't comfortable in heels. Excuse me, may I sit down? Yes, of course. Kelly nodded at the chairs next to them, then glared menacingly at her daughter because she was about to ask something. The woman sat down and sighed. God, why did I put them on? My legs hurt, so I can't stand. I can't wait for the flight. Judging by how masterfully she spoke Russian, the woman was their compatriot. The road is better to choose comfortable shoes and clothes. The woman waved her hand. It's all a woman's foolishness. With my husband divorced last week and cheated on me bastard like that. So I decided that now I can live for myself, and at the same time in divorce. I deserve it. It's all on me. All he does is have fun. Kelly noticed her daughter's triumphant look and even shook her head. Women weren't as stupid as they might have seemed at first. And it wasn't long before Kelly was eager to hear about the flowers as well. It turned out that this woman was engaged in growing some unusual flowers, which were very popular. The business was small, but with a stable income. Now is just the time when flowers are not blooming yet, so I decided to go to my homeland. Are you from Russia too? Kelly smiled. Yes, we've only lived here for 5 years. We came to live with our parents. Dad's been here for a long time, and Mom came a little earlier than us. The woman sighed. Probably family drama too. Yeah, I guess no family is without it these days. Dasha was tired of just sitting there. Mom, I'm gonna go buy some magazines to do on the plane. Just go for a little while so I don't worry. Okay, Mom, I'll be right back. Nancy left. The woman smiled. That's a nice girl you've got there. Beautiful. You can tell she was born in love. Kelly grinned sadly. Yes, in love. Not for long though. First her dad put us in a lot of debt, and then he crashed. That's when we moved back in with her parents. Oh, why are you coming back? Debts don't get forgiven that fast. No, not at all. We paid it all off. Or rather, my parents helped us. And the more years go by, the more I realize that love fades. I don't know if it's because of what he did, but the fact remains. Yeah, you've had a rough go of it. I mean, running away with a little kid. So you never went to visit his grave again? No, I'm ashamed to admit it. But for some reason, the thought of going there gives me the creeps. The woman was looking behind Kelly, and Kelly turned around. She knew immediately that something was wrong. Nancy was walking toward them at a brisk pace. The girl was pale. Kelly jumped up. Nancy, what's wrong? Did someone scare you? The girl nodded, then shook her head negatively. Nancy, what's wrong with you? Mommy, Nancy, it's okay. Kelly was so nervous that even her teeth were beating out a drum roll. Nancy looked at her with adult eyes and said, That's where I saw Daddy there with him, Aunt Emily. Kelly collapsed into a chair and the frightened neighbor held out a bottle of water to her. That can't be right. You've made a mistake, haven't you? Our dad's dead. I recognized him myself at the morgue. Mom, you know me, you couldn't have made a mistake. And the best part is, it looks like they're on the same plane as us. We're gonna go and check it out. But the woman took her hand. We're boarding. If it's your husband and he's on this flight, you'll see him. But how can that be? It doesn't make any sense. They headed for the gate. At the last minute, Kelly texted her father. There's something weird going on. Nancy said she saw Max. The plane was already in the air. When it passed them, it was Emily. There was no doubt about it. Kelly managed to cover herself with a magazine, and Nancy was looking out the porthole at that moment. Her heart was pounding frantically in her chest. If it was Emily, Nancy couldn't be wrong about her father either. Kelly didn't understand anything at all. They were among the last to descend the gangway. Kelly could clearly see her husband's figure ahead. She didn't know what to do, but now she realized that this man wasn't just a scoundrel, he was a scumbag. At the airport lounge, Kelly headed over to them. Hello, Max. Hello, Emily. Her ex-husband flinched and turned to her. Emily turned as well. But if Max had a rather hunted look, she looked on with hatred. My God, what kind of people? Kelly. But I think I'm the one who should be surprised. I buried you too, Max, and you're alive and well. Emily didn't let him answer. You can take him back. He's not capable of anything. If it wasn't for me, we'd have starved to death a long time ago. No, thank you. But I will definitely take back my money that my family paid for you. She grabbed her arm. Just try, and there'll be another mound in the cemetery. Nancy cradled her knees, and so regretted coming near them in front of her daughter at all. Come on, Nancy. We've got to go. She lifted her head and headed for the exit. Who knew what it took to keep her from bursting into tears? How much she had endured. If it hadn't been for her parents, she never would have gotten out of the state she was in. She loved him so much. And Nancy? Kelly glimpsed a glimpse of her daughter. She remembered little Nancy asking about Daddy every day. And him, he'd not only cut them out of her life, but he'd left a pile of debt. And he knew full well they had debt collectors going to them. Kelly didn't know what she was going to do. One thing she realized was that now she should just collapse, just lie there. The smells from the apartment were mind-blowing. Kelly found the strength to smile. Nancy we seemed to be greeted, and none other than Vanessa. Nancy had already calmed down a bit and was tearing up the stairs. Grandma said she was coming, but it had completely slipped the girl's mind. Nancy's grandmother hung on to the older woman, who immediately cried. God, she was so big she didn't recognize it. Then she looked at Lena and raised her eyebrows. Kelly, you're not wearing a face. Is something wrong? Nancy, with childlike directness, said, Grandma, have we seen Daddy? Who? Well, Daddy. Daddy Max and Aunt Emily. When they were fed, Nancy fell asleep in front of the TV. Vanessa sat Kelly down in front of her. Tell me. There's nothing to tell, Grandma. We met them at the airport. They're not hiding. They live like normal people, I guess. The old lady was silent for a long time, apparently remembering how Kelly was climbing the walls in grief. What do you intend to do? I want to get justice. Oh, Kelly, a lot has changed in the time you've been gone. I wouldn't advise you. Who knows who they are now? So you're suggesting I just forget everything and go on mourning my husband? And the father's daughters? The old woman was silent again, and then said, please be careful. Of course, Alex will arrive tomorrow. That's good. It's time for me. Have a rest. Grandma, what are you doing? Where are you going at night? The old lady grinned. As if you don't remember that I'm always at home at night. And then I'm ancient, of course, but not so ancient that I don't know how to use a cab. Kelly had just had time to clear the table when the doorbell rang. She smiled. The years go by. Granny doesn't change. Still forgetting umbrellas, purses, wallets. She swung the door open and the smile slowly slid off her face. Max stood in front of her. Well, hello, goodbye. The woman wanted to close the door, but Max put his foot up. We'll talk. He walked past her into the kitchen, sat down where he always sat before. Why did you come? We don't have anything to talk about. He looked at her thoughtfully. That's what I thought when I saw you at the airport. I was a little worried, I admit. Then I realized it was a real stroke of luck. Kelly grinned. What kind of luck is that for you? I guess you were glad you were going to spend the rest of your life in prison." He raised his eyebrows. "What's that for?" "Your death, your debts, a lot of things." "You're wrong, Kelly. You've always been short-sighted, down to earth. Couldn't think big easily. Tank's a different story. She's a real bitch, though. But the benefit for me in meeting her is not bad. The thing is, my relationship with Anna is dead. Although it was her idea to pull this whole thing off. We wanted our freedom so badly, and there are debt collectors around every corner. So Anka came up with a super plan that worked perfectly. Now I realize I have to figure out a way to arrange my future. I have two options. One, from what I understand, you're still single. So we could reunite and raise our daughter together, which you're looking pretty good right now." Seeing a grimace of disgust, he grinned. "I remember you used to recoil from any touch from me." "Well, the second one then. I've had some thoughts on how to spin up a business very quickly. But as you realize, I need money for that, which you have no shortage of." Kelly couldn't stand it and laughed. "Max, are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? I'm going to go to the police tomorrow and file a report on you." He laughed too. "Sure, go ahead. I'll give it away somehow. I'll have a certificate that I've lived without memories all this time." "Well, a person loses his memory sometimes. And then I'll write a statement that I forbid to take my daughter abroad. Anyway, I'm not an animal. I'll give you until tomorrow to think about it. I'll drop by tomorrow." He walked silently past her. Kelly didn't even move. Also silently, she closed the door behind her. She rushed to the window. Max got into the car Emily was driving, so today's visit had been thought up by her too. Her cell phone vibrated in her pocket. God, she'd completely forgotten to call her own. It was Alex. And somewhere in the background, her parents' voices. "Kelly, what's wrong? Why didn't you call?" Kelly sighed. "Putting me on speakerphone to tell me everything at once." She spoke slowly, giving her parents time to calm down. "Mom, pay attention to that man sitting by the window. Something very important has happened in his life, and it's more good than bad." Kelly looked where her daughter was pointing. There was indeed a man sitting there, an unremarkable man of 1,000 in a suit and tie, about 50 or so years old. He wasn't reading, he wasn't on the phone, he wasn't doing anything from which to draw any conclusions. Not very interesting. Why do you say that? But it's just, look, he doesn't have much luggage, so he's traveling on business. He keeps looking out the window dreamily, like he's rushing time, and he's always wiping sweat. It's not hot in the lounge, so it's reasonable to assume that he's just scared. It might not be his first time flying, but then he wouldn't be so nervous. And if he's so scared, but he's flying anyway, then something has happened that he can't miss. One possibility, given his age. He had a grandchild. Kelly couldn't take it anymore and laughed. God, you've got a whole story to tell. If any of it's true, you shouldn't be working as a psychologist. You should be working in a police station, solving crimes. But then you're looking for someone else. Here's Mom seeing a woman. She's probably recently divorced. Kelly literally stares at the woman, but again, she doesn't see anything. But the mom here is quite plain. She doesn't wear heels because she's really uncomfortable right now. She's always fixing her hair. So she just recently got a new haircut, a little flashy, and the outfit is like screaming that she's got it all together, plus the airport. She'd obviously decided to take a change of scenery to unwind. Kelly listened and nodded. Yes, it was exactly as her daughter had described. The woman suddenly headed toward them. She really wasn't comfortable in heels. "Excuse me, may I sit down?" Yes, of course. Kelly nodded at the chairs next to them, then glared menacingly at her daughter because she was about to ask something. The woman sat down and sighed. God, why did I put them on? My legs hurt, so I can't stand. I can't wait for the flight. Judging by how masterfully she spoke Russian, the woman was their compatriot. The road is better to choose comfortable shoes and clothes. The woman waved her hand. It's all a woman's foolishness. With my husband divorced last week and cheated on me bastard like that. So I decided that now I can live for myself, and at the same time in divorce. I deserve it. It's all on me. All he does is have fun. Kelly noticed her daughter's triumphant look and even shook her head. Women weren't as stupid as they might have seemed at first. And it wasn't long before Kelly was eager to hear about the flowers as well. It turned out that this woman was engaged in growing some unusual flowers, which were very popular. The business was small, but with a stable income. Now is just the time when flowers are not blooming yet, so I decided to go to my homeland. Are you from Russia too? Kelly smiled yes, we've only lived here for 5 years. We came to live with our parents. Dad's been here for a long time and Mom came a little earlier than us. The woman sighed. Probably family drama too. Yeah, I guess no family is without it these days. Dasha was tired of just sitting there. Mom, I'm gonna go buy some magazines to do on the plane. Just go for a little while so I don't worry. Okay, Mom, I'll be right back. Nancy left. The woman smiled. That's a nice girl you've got there. Beautiful. You can tell she was born in love. Kelly grinned sadly. Yes, in love. Not for long though. First her dad put us in a lot of debt, and then he crashed. That's when we moved back in with her parents. Oh, why are you coming back? Debts don't get forgiven that fast. No, not at all. We paid it all off. Or rather, my parents helped us. And the more years go by, the more I realize that love fades. When Alex finished, said so scheduled a meeting in some cafe for 7 hours in advance, agreed with Vanessa that you leave on her Nancy, I fly out in 2 hours. I'll be at your place soon, Kelly. I heard my mom say that. I think I'm gonna call my sister. She stopped the car. But how'd it go? Just like she said it would. The young woman grimaced. God, it's been years, and your Kelly's still such an idiot. I don't think she'll go to the police. I'm sure she won't. She probably should have run. But that's Kelly. She's as straight as a post. She's never been able to think of more than one option. So we can rule out her running right off the bat. What else can she do? Basically, she's going to be worried about her daughter. By the way, I didn't know she was single. I just assumed. Who'd want someone like her? Well, unless it's a sucker like you. You didn't laugh. Max cringed. He was determined when Kelly gave them the money. He'd get the hell out of here, in case she wants to come back to me. She threw him a scornful look, but I don't think so. Come on, let's go to bed. There's a lot to think about tomorrow until she calls me. The next day, they worked out the details of the conversation. It was decided that the apartment would be taken away as well. If Kelly gave even a ruble, everything would go back to the way it was. She repeated over and over again how to behave, what to say. Then she threw herself on the back of the sofa. We can go to the sea again. Max gave me a little slap, yeah. But I thought we put that money into business. She jumped into business. What business is that? Wasn't it another one of your delusions? Max shook his head stubbornly. It's a good idea, and it won't fail. I've heard of it, and I've seen it when I lived with that chicken. They didn't have time to argue. Max's phone rang. He looked at Emily and saw an unfamiliar number. Well, Beria, what are you afraid of? You're clean before the law, aren't you? Max put the receiver gently to his ear, yes. Max, it's Kelly. Let's go to the cafe by the fountain tonight. I don't want Nancy to hear us talking. Okay, you got a deal. He was about to hang up, but Kelly added that you could bring Emily. It's a family dinner after all. And Kelly hung up. Emily cringed. I guess you didn't sound so sure that Kelly was feeling too good. They drove up to the cafe, entered. They immediately saw Kelly. She was wearing a nice suit, earrings in her ears. She thought, that's okay, I'm going to kill you now. The table was big with lots of chairs, and she couldn't find anything cozier. Kelly shrugged. If you don't like it, you can stand. Emily looked at her in surprise. The cafe was crowded, so she didn't say anything. Sitting down on the chair next to her, Max came down. You thought about it. I take it. Now all we have to talk about is the amount of compensation. Kelly suddenly looked behind them and smiled. Emily sensed that things were not going according to plan. She too turned around and squeezed herself to them 6. Clara, and she was being supported under the elbow by a young man. Apparently, XXI was unclear to this Kelly why her mother had come. They hadn't seen each other since they had broken up, and the mother did not even know that the daughter has practically a husband. But I guess the in-laws let her in on the whole thing. And here I thought I'd raised a daughter who wouldn't bite a snake. Oh, you little bitch. You'll embarrass me in front of my relatives. Pay for the good with rottenness. Emily jumped up. You're not yelling in the marketplace. And you shouldn't give a damn about me, so don't you dare interfere. Clara has always had a great fiery temper. She must have relaxed and forgotten all about it. You're gonna tell your mother what to do. A resounding slap came straight to my school. While she was trying to figure out what was going on, her mother had time to give her a few more cracks before she rushed for the exit. And Clara sat down, turned to Max. Come on, darling, tell me. Max wanted to leave too. He was well aware that their so-perfect plan had failed miserably. He stood up. And I think I'll go. But then a heavy hand fell on his shoulder. Sit down. He turned around sharply and was stunned. He would have recognized these people from 1,000. They all had a peculiarity that made them look like collectors, and not those who come from the bank, asking politely to repay the arrears, but those who work for a private individual. The man sat down on the other side of Clara. Alex smiled. Well, I see we're all here. Let's get started, shall we? He put his hand on Kelly's arm and became so calm. Another man came up to the old man, sorry, a little late. It was the best lawyer in town. How much would you like to receive from my fiancée? But why are you so quick? Maybe she's decided to come back. Then it'll be one amount. If not, it's a completely different amount. Alex turned to the man. That's a serious bid. Max has completely lost it. He just came for the money. The second man with a smile said, well, talk, don't be shy. Everyone is here. Max stammered and said the amount. Alex looked into the paper. Then he turned to the man of gangster appearance. Well, we'll make out the amount is slightly more than the amount of alimony, so we can equalize. In a second, the money was lying in front of him, and the man was a lawyer, slipping some documents at the hard look of his neighbor. Max realized it would be best not to argue. As soon as the papers were signed, the money moved his knees. The man said it was alimony. And when to give debts, Max will start this, we will decide later. Max watched and realized he was caught in his own trap, but there was no way out. The debt collector stood up too. It was nice to meet my client. What if he decides to run away? Max was picked up 3 days later. They did a little investigation because there were already plenty of articles for Max. When they took him away, Max cried. Clara tearfully begged them not to put her Emily Cut in jail. Let's not let her daughter go to jail, but still her daughter. And a day later, she took Emily to 2-Ups. Kelly hardly realized that everything was over. She turned to Alex. You know, I knew you were a very good man. But what you did for us, he hugged Kelly not for you, but for all of us, for us. She also agreed to accept me into her family. 3 years passed. Kelly watched Nancy dance masterfully. Today is her daughter's first real recital. Their studio is performing at a celebration on the town stage. Next up is a sort of leading prima donna. It's a pity, of course, that Alex hasn't been able to make it since they made the decision to stay in their homeland. He was head over heels in his work. Kelly understood everything and tried not to interfere with him. Just yesterday, his parents had returned. Dad walked along the promenade in the evening and said, visiting. Good, but home is 100 times better. Nancy saw them. They were sitting in the front rows. The music stopped and the dancers bowed. The crowd applauded loudly. And then Kelly noticed some movement near the stage. She took a closer look. Sure enough, it was Alex. A huge bouquet in his hands makes its way to Dasha. She saw him from the stage and rushed towards him, pushing the guards away. Alex picked her up in his arms. Here you go. Do you deserve it? He held out the bouquet and curtsied jokingly. Wendy wiped away her tears. Simon himself wiped his eyes suspiciously often. Nancy suddenly looked seriously at Alex. Alex, perhaps it should have been done earlier. He wondered what exactly to ask. Would you mind if I called you Daddy? He bowed his head. I'd be happy if you called me that. Everyone standing around wiped away Kelly's tears and heard them talking, but she realized that something was going on at the stage. Finally, Alex started to make her way over to her. Alex, what is your emergency? He looked at his wife with wet, too moist eyes and said Nancy asked if I could be called Daddy. Kelly smiled just in time. Alex raised an eyebrow in surprise. Timely? Yeah, see, you'll have at least a little time to get used to the title, won't you? Alex shook his head and then stared at Kelly. Wait, you mean? Kelly nodded modestly. Alex spun her around first, then rushed towards the stage. The security guards pretended to be very busy because they understood with this man. There was nothing they could do. Alex grabbed the microphone and shouted, I'm about to have a baby, and now I'm going to have 2 children. At the family council, it was decided to sell all the available real estate and buy a big, nice house so that everyone would have enough room, even Grandma Vera. The old lady cried for a long time, saying goodbye to her square meters. And Kelly wanted to cancel the deal, but the grandmother forbade it. No, Kelly, I'm not old enough to make such invitations. That evening, they sat in the yard of the new house and drank tea, celebrating the cake and Nancy's success. She was sitting there all important. Kelly watched her large family with a smile. Mom and Dad seemed to be getting happier every year. Grandma is still pretty spry. She and Nancy were arguing about something. Alexa's husband was looking at her with loving eyes, and she honestly wanted to cuddle up to him. And so no, it lasted all evening. Kelly glanced at her watch. One guest was running late, but she still heard after 30 seconds. Did I really think I'd never find you again? Kelly flipped out. Her ex-boyfriend, whom they'd met at the airport. She smiled embarrassedly. And I'm not alone. Kelly moved outside the wicket. They're shifting from foot to foot. The man-woman smiled. Come in, please. I'll introduce you to my large family.
Subscribe and click the bell.
My eyes did not look at you with hatred, the blonde said, looking at her newborn daughter. An orderly walking by angrily scut the blonde. Oh my God! Aren't you ashamed to talk like that? She's an innocent child. The nurse left, and the young mother again looked into the serene face of her daughter and repeated in a whisper, My eyes would not look at you. And she burst into tears. Life was ruined at the root. A golden 22 years. And here she lies, sleeping, yes, sniffling. This little girl's wonderful, all-around charming daddy owned a diner down the road. He was a practical man. Did I promise you anything? No. Well, you can solve your own problems. Ashhole, she shouted. Don't expect me to give you your car back. You gave it to me, so I'll keep it, ashhole. You can drive it for all I care. He smiled, and Wendy, not from anger at his carefree complacency, wanted right now to take and run over him, this very car. And in the women's clinic, she was so tortured with a referral for abortion that when the coveted paper was in her hands, it was as useful as a bridge along the river. Get out! The gynecologist bellowed at her. Couldn't you come earlier? I couldn't. The pregnant woman said, They wouldn't give me a referral. They kept dragging and dragging. How could I come earlier? You couldn't come before, and you can't come now either. Get out of here. And then there was a friend who said something about a grandmother who lives in the suburbs, but can help, if you bring her money and food at once and promise to keep quiet. The grandmother lived in a private house somewhere on the outskirts of the suburbs and in general was not distinguished by politeness either. How long has it been? She asked angrily, and having heard the answer, repeated what the gynecologist had already said. What else have you got in mind? What perhaps told you that the grandmother is ancient, to think long ago forgot to think? I've been a gynecologist for 30 years. She's here, and she's flapping her eyes. Do you realize why you're here? It's a full-fledged surgical operation. Where did you go before, you slutty bimbo? We went back to town in silence. Don't be so sad. My friend comforted me. Maybe it will somehow dissolve itself. Yeah, in 3 months. gloomily replied the girl. Maybe it will not dissolve, but a baby is also not bad. You have to have a baby sometime. They say it rejuvenates the body. Yes, rejuvenates, and cabbage also grows breasts. No tenderness and love for the child she did not feel, and he, as if sensing this, and tormented the future mother, incessant nausea, edema, and low blood pressure. On top of all, pure maiden skin, now covered with pimples, and do not want to look at themselves in the mirror. But if I had to, it ended with a flood of tears and fierce self-loathing. I'm ugly, she repeated in horror, looking at her blurred figure. There is no waist left at all. And what kind of legs have become? Thick as an elephant's. Her ankles are swollen, now they're as big as her knees, and her breasts are as big as a peasant's. Wendy used to be proud of her chiseled, delicate figure. She was glad that she could eat everything she wanted and not gain a single gram of extra weight. And her hair? That used to be so lush long, like a mermaid, but now they split so that I had to cut them off by 20 centimeters. And for some reason it always looks dirty, as it often does. Think of the baby. Everyone around them was yelling. Did Wendy feel like screaming? Yeah, why? Why should I think of this baby? I didn't want it, and I don't want it. I'm only going to have a baby because they wouldn't give me an abortion referral for a long time. And you, like crazy people, think about the baby, think about the baby. Think for yourselves, if you're so smart. With endless tears and worries, Wendy brought the situation to the point that right from the next examination in the consultation, she was taken directly to the maternity hospital for preservation. Her blood pressure was so high that she had to spend a whole day on a bed in intensive care under a drip. But the labor was a breeze. Wendy had no time to be frightened. The midwife was already showing her daughter. What a beauty you have. Look at her. She looks just like her mom. But the mother did not want to look, closed her eyes, and even turned her head the other way just in case. Well, well, roughly encouraged her midwife. It happens, nothing. You will sleep, recover, and love will cover. Nothing, you will still be happy about your daughter, you will. She wasn't happy. Not then, not later. Never at all. The girl did not sleep at night, and the mother spent hours at the crib, shaking it. For some reason it was unpleasant for her to take the child in her arms. And all these sleepless nights, half asleep, tired days, in her head she had only one persistent thought. Why didn't I leave her in the maternity hospital? By now I would be free as the wind again. It was a shame to realize that life was passing her by. There were sunny spring days, and if it were not for my daughter, you could go for a walk, watch a new movie, eat a fruit ice cream, not hurrying somewhere in the park. And the money? How much money was now spent on a screaming child that no one wanted, not the father or the mother? Wendy bit her lip to keep from screaming in anger every time she went into the store. If she were free, she could buy everything here, or almost everything, and certainly that black dress and the scarlet shoes, the perfume that had just come into fashion. She'd stop looking in any stores at all, except for groceries, to avoid getting upset. I'm a klutz. With despair, thought the young mother. A wretched, half-impoverished, half-needed Plutchen. Wendy was firmly convinced that from now on her life would be a dull crawl from the playground to the store and home. Every day, all the time, forever, and without mercy. When the little girl turned 2, a miracle happened. Wendy was noticed by an interesting older man. He smelled of quiet strength and great possibilities. Had I finally gotten lucky? She thought with a sinking heart. In her dreams, Wendy saw herself in a snow-white dress and with a huge bouquet of flowers, holding the hand of her respectable husband. She would walk out of the marriage institution and get into an elegant black car. They will go on a wedding trip, and when they return, a splendidly decorated apartment will be waiting for them. Or better yet, not an apartment, but a whole house. Something not heavy and not stingy, but as if floating light, certainly with huge windows, so that there was a lot of air. It will be possible to start living like a human being, to start some unusual hobby, to wear a beautiful dress at home, to wait for her husband from work in the evenings. And then a shrill child's roar broke into her sweet dreams. Here it comes. That clumsy Lisa had fallen again, or hit something, or burned herself. I wonder if it's all kids trying to kill themselves all the time. Or is it just Wendy who's unlucky? Get up. She pulled her crying daughter to her feet. Get up. My misfortune. Let's get dressed. We're going for a walk now. Dressing, by the way, was a separate agony. Lousy girl did not want to stand still and endlessly twirled on the spot. Are you going to stand or not? Wendy shouted, "What are you doing to me, you little brat? Stand still and don't move." The girl froze fearfully in place. Her eyes were round and blue, just like her father's, the fool. Wendy thought, just as round, big and dull. The memory made the mood even angrier. And Wendy tugged her daughter roughly by the scruff of the neck. "Let's go." No, wait. She tore a piece of paper out of her notebook and scribbled a few words on it. She stuffed the piece of paper into a bag, along with a bun, a bottle of water. "Now let's go move it, you bastard." She shouted and grabbed the little girl's hand and dragged her behind her. The woods were close by, and it was beautiful. Wendy was glad she wouldn't have to go across town with the baby and spend money on transportation. And she wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible. Girls, I really like the woods. Squatting down, she watched with curiosity as a ladybug, crawling along the blades of grass. Wendy's brain was working feverishly fast. Get it far away, no one will find it, but they'll find the body, and then they can get to me. Better leave it here then. Maybe someone will pick it up. I need to rent an apartment in another neighborhood now. Right today. Someplace where nobody knows me, and I can rent mine. Faster. I just need it fast. Lisa, she called out to her daughter. Stay here and wait. I'll be there soon. And she walked away, pretending to go to the nearest bushes, but she moved on to the place where she had left the car. And the farther Wendy walked away from her daughter, the more happiness filled her whole being. Freedom. Could it be that at last she could beg her freedom from fate? Could she really come home right now and throw away all the children's things? Could she really be free? Lisa had no recollection of how she had gotten into the orphanage, and that could even be considered a kind of luck. At least she had never known the homesickness that tormented the other kids. All of them taken away from alcoholic parents or early deprived of mom and dad were homesick. Lisa had comforted them more than once, crying furtively, not opening her heart to anyone, and every time she wiped their tears, hugging them, she thought about how lucky she was after all. Her 2-year-old, her caregivers told her, was found all alone in the woods, with a bag containing a bun, a scraggly stuffed lion cub, and a note. The girl's name is Lisa. She's healthy, not cranky. Take her away. I can't take care of her. A local forester found the little girl and told later that he found her very close to the edge of the forest. Immediately after he came to the road with a frozen baby in his arms, he immediately heard the sound of a car leaving and even managed to notice that the car was white. But whose car was it? What were the license plates? It all remained a mystery, and in the next few years no one tried to solve it. By nightfall, the man brought the girl to the nearest orphanage, where a kind-hearted nanny gave the little girl warm tea and sandwiches, and then bathed her and put her on a free bed. In those days, such sad stories happened in great numbers. The girl's name was changed, as they always did with foundlings to change their fate for the better. And Lisa became Kathy, an orphanage pupil and officially an orphan. Kathy, however, had a good life. The head of the orphanage was of that rare breed of people for whom work was a vocation. The same fanatical attitude to the work she demanded from the whole staff, and that's why only those for whom the happiness and comfort of their little pupils was paramount stayed there. So in the orphanage were affectionate nannies, strict but fair educators, and all together they created an atmosphere close to the family. Later, having already become an adult, Kathy often had to hear that orphanage residents are wild people, socially unadapted, and moreover piously convinced that the whole world owes them by right of orphanhood. It was said that a graduate of an orphanage can be immediately deduced because he has no idea what it is to keep clean or wash dishes. But it wasn't like that in Kathy's childhood. First of all, this orphanage, or, as the adults preferred to call it, a children's institution, was private. The spouses, who had spent half their lives working in state orphanages, decided in the 90s to open a private orphanage, the first in the region. They had to act at their own risk. Not only that in those years everyone was afraid of racketeers, but there was no support from friends. You want to cash in on a child's grief? This is the mildest of what the couple heard from those whom they used to consider friends. And what's more hurtful, even from relatives, they had to grit their teeth and go forward, supporting each other and learning to grow rhinoceros skin along the way. Otherwise, it was possible to give up all their plans at once, but the racketeers, like their neighbors, friends, and relatives, took to the new project in the state, almost with enthusiasm. It was strictly forbidden to collect tribute from the self-sacrificing founders of the orphanage, but all kinds of support and assistance were encouraged. Of course, in this matter, the racketeering kings pursued their own interests. First of all, charity was a good way to launder money. But the main majority had already managed to realize that soon enough the bandits' freedom would end, and those who were smarter began to transfer assets into legal business, and a businessman who generously donates to charity is traditionally more trustworthy. There was another major difference between the orphanage and the others. Labor education was the norm here. Of course, acquaintances with a fierce envy to the prosperous business immediately arranged it, and on the subject of the use of child labor. But all those who came at the request of the commission left with nothing. All safety rules were observed, and there were no children exhausted from fatigue. The superintendent, everyone's favorite Vanessa, established reasonable orders, statistics on the children in the orphanages. She told everyone who came to apply for a job. Could scare anyone. About 10% managed to make it in life. 40% become alcoholics, drug addicts, prison inmates. Why does that happen? Many reasons. But one of them strikes me as particularly important. In most orphanages, technicians clean, cooks cook, cleaners take care of clothes and shoes. Growing up children in adulthood are helpless. They do not know how to clean the house and do not even understand why they need to clean the house, how to cook dinner. In the end, they do not have even basic ideas about how to plan a budget for the month. To lose money in the first 2 or 3 days and then to borrow money from acquaintances until the end of the month is the norm for them. That is why our institution has introduced a system of labor education. Children should realize that in adult life, no one will owe them anything. The children learn to keep clean and cook on their own, and older kids earn their first money and learn how to handle it. Someone admired such methods, Someone did not accept them, but the headmistress was adamant. We are not raising future dependents, not a contingent for prisons, but full-fledged members of society. Our goal is to release into the big world a person who will work and appreciate the work of others, who will create a family and become a responsible parent. Starting at the age of 7, the children cleaned their rooms every weekend and took turns in the kitchen, helping to wash dishes and cook. Each room was awarded prize points, and at the end of the week, winners could exchange their points for candy, another purchase, or a trip somewhere. High school students were given the opportunity to earn extra money. There was an extensive vegetable garden on the adjoining property. In winter, when there was nothing to do in the vegetable garden, the children were offered to clear snow from the territory or perform some minor repairs under the guidance of a tutor. And although such labor education not always met with great enthusiasm, but still graduates and years later thanked Vanessa for the fact that in the big life they were released not savages. And Kathy was grateful to both her orphanage and Vanessa for the fact that in her independent life she was not confused. A small but own apartment allocated by the state and work almost immediately found. At first Kathy worked as a molder in a dumpling shop, then for some time stood behind the cash register in a supermarket, and a little later she got a job in a veterinary clinic. There the work was quieter. All she had to do was to make appointments for clients and take payment. So she worked for a year, resting from the hustle and bustle and the need to rotate on all turns. She loved it at the clinic. She even had the idea of studying to be a veterinarian. And perhaps everything was very feasible if it were not for one small but very significant but. Robert showed up at the clinic like the sun. A blonde-haired, 2-meter-tall, Viking-like hero with a red kitty who turned out to be unbelievably small in his huge hands. I beat the dogs off the street. He said worriedly, "Look, is it safe?" Poor little thing was frightened. His voice was enveloping and thick, like warm honey. Kathy couldn't resist and reached out to pet the cat. It was hardly in need of help. It was dozing peacefully, nestled on the chest of its savior. When the girl's hand touched it, the kitty lazily opened its golden eyes. "I'll get the doctor now," said the girl. "You wait a minute." Only one of the 4 doctors was free, and Kathy was very glad that the only one available was a man. The ladies would have flirted with the handsome visitor, and then Kathy did not have time to think. The Viking had already left the office, and his red-haired pet had gone back to sleep. "Is everything all right?" Kathy smiled. "Thank goodness. How much do we owe for the appointment?" Kathy quickly entered all the owner's information into the computer and printed out the pet exam report. While he was paying, the girl was thinking about what else she could talk to this touching giant about. "Robert," she asked, "will you keep the kitty?" He blew affectionately on the cat's ear. "Where will she go now? I'll bring her back in 2 weeks for vaccinations. I should think of a name for her. Maybe you can give me a hint? She's so golden-eyed, red as honey." Kathy smiled. "She probably needs a sweet name, Honey," and bent a beautiful eyebrow at the Viking and immediately laughed at his own joke. "No, it's too long. Halva." "Right. Let's go with Halva. It's so sweet. What's up?" "Let's go home, Halva. Goodbye." He squinted and read the name tag. "Kathy, see you in 2 weeks." Exactly 14 days later, Robert stepped through the door of the veterinary clinic, which was open due to the summer heat. In his arms was a red-haired and golden, calmed and rounded Halva. "Good afternoon." He smiled dazzlingly. Kathy's heart throbbed. In 2 weeks, the impression Robert had made on her had faded. Why am I so excited? She asked herself. So what if he was a good-looking guy? Aren't there enough of them? And yet she waited for this day. She saved some money and went to a beauty salon to get a manicure, and then the hairdressers persuaded her to get a melamine, and it turned out that it was not in vain. Now the girl's hair seemed almost twice as voluminous and shimmered beautifully in the sun. Kathy even began to color, going to work, although previously considered it unnecessary. And she began to wear her few pieces of jewelry, a simple silver ring and earrings with small transparent stones. The earrings had been given to her by the head of the orphanage herself for her excellent studies. The ring was a gift from a sponsor for March 8th. Now Kathy felt almost beautiful when she met Viking Robert. Here comes Halva for her vaccination, she said, and went over to pet the kitty. How are you doing? Has the kitty already settled in the house? In fact, she could have waited for Robert to come closer to the reception desk. But Kathy wanted to show off her slim figure, which the uniform could not hide. Robert glanced at the girl with an appraising gaze. She's settled in, and that's very nice, because it's boring to live alone, and there's a cat waiting at home. Kathy, I could hear some hidden hint in those words. You don't say, she sighed. I live alone too, and sometimes I get bored. And you? Robert winked. Come and visit. When you get bored, call me. You have my contacts, right? This is awkward. The girl was embarrassed. What's awkward about it? The Viking was nobly indignant. Come, Halva, and I will be waiting for you. That same evening, Kathy met up with her best friend to discuss the news. Nancy she had met long ago back at the orphanage. Nancy was 10 years old when she was taken away from her father, a bitter drunk. On her first night in the orphanage, the girl tucked her nose into the corner of her pillow and blissfully said, How nice it is here. Kathy sat up on the bed from surprise. You're so good. Shocked, she exhaled. Other people cry for weeks and weeks, and you say it's good. What's bad about it? Nancy was surprised. The bed's clean, the food's good, nobody drinks. It's good. And the next day she told Kathy all about it and how she had begged on the street to buy a bottle for her father because otherwise he beat her. And about how one day her father disappeared somewhere and the girl didn't eat anything for 3 whole days. And only when she fainted at school, they took her to the hospital, and from there they brought her to the orphanage. They said Daddy went to get treatment for alcoholism. She snorted. They say that when my dad gets well, he'll get a job and take me home. They lie like I'm a little girl. He's cured, of course. Well, Kathy suggested thoughtfully, maybe he really wants to be cured. We had a girl, but her mother gave up drinking and took her back. Now they come to visit every Saturday and bring candy. That's not my daddy. Nancy said sadly, he'll never give up his booze. But that's where she was wrong. Nancy's father was indeed treated in a narcological dispensary and forever forbade himself even to think about drinking. Moreover, he got a job and visited his daughter every night. After 6 months, he was able to take her away for good. Nancy's father turned out to be a talented carpenter and often came to the shelter with his daughter. Each time with some new gift, new chairs for the babies, long benches for the dining room, and once he made 10 closets for the children's rooms and didn't charge a penny for his work. Though Vanessa insisted on paying for it, "You took care of my daughter," he said, while I, like a dog, the last. Tears of remorse and shame welled up in his eyes. He never stopped blaming himself for the past. When Nancy turned 18, her father was gone. Some hooligans attacked him as he was walking after work in the evening and beat him badly. The man died on the spot from the beating. Nancy got her father's apartment, but she had no job, and Vanessa came to the rescue again. She helped Nancy to pass the secretarial courses and took a job with her. But she didn't work for long. "The pay is low. There are no prospects," she said, "and secretaries are required many places. I'll get a job in some firm so that the boss is a man. You know what I mean? I want to live like a man, not work for an idea." Only much later Kathy could guess from the fragmentary stories of her friend that her father, driven by an eternal sense of guilt for his former drunkenness, had spoiled his daughter too much. That's where Nancy got that unpleasant arrogance and ironclad confidence that she deserved the best and preferably for free. She managed to get her dream job after all. The ideal lasted for 3 months, and at the beginning of the 4th month, the boss's wife flew into their office like a furious fury. The boss was just enjoying his morning coffee, and the pretty secretary was sitting on his lap. Nancy was out of work that morning and missing a few other little things. A few strands of hair and 3 broken fingernails. For a month Nancy sat unemployed, nursing her bruises and complaining to Kathy about the injustice of her fate. A job offer from a friend at a veterinary clinic she turned down, but she was lucky again. Her next employer turned out to be a widower, and now it was possible not to fear jealous wives. Since then, the girl managed to make repairs in the apartment and even have their own, although not expensive, car. With Kathy, however, they were friends almost as before. That is, Kathy pretended not to notice the increasing arrogance of her friend. "I don't know what to do, Nancy," she confessed that evening. "There's this man I met, and didn't you notice if he was coming in his own car or what?" Nancy interrupted her. "How's he dressed? Is he wearing brand-name clothes or market clothes? Clothes like clothes." Kathy frowned. "I don't know your brands, and I don't know what he's driving." Nancy sighed brokenly. "When will you learn to pay attention to such things? It's very important. A handsome face is one thing, but maybe he doesn't have any other virtues besides a pretty face. So what then? What's that got to do with it? So now we have to evaluate every man we meet and see if he's rich or poor? Is it better to waste time with a pauper? Live on a dime and admire his pretty face until he gets sick? All right, well, you gotta take a chance anyway. Stop by his place if he wants you to. See where he... It had been 3 months. No, Kathy, this was not the deal." Robert smiled crookedly at the sight of the certificate from the antenatal clinic. "You should have thought about avoiding pregnancy." He looked terribly confident. He looked at his friend as condescendingly as a wise adult looks at a misbehaving child. "You can't fool me, but I'm not angry with you." That's what was clear in his gaze. And that condescension was so disgusting that Kathy lowered her head so as not to see it. So that was it. Turns out pregnancy was something to be avoided. Why hadn't they agreed on that right away? "Wasn't there anything you should have thought of?" asked the girl. "2 people have children. I am a man," he answered simply. "After all, it is not me to go 9 months pregnant, to give birth and a child alone to raise, too, not me. From me only alimony, and even then not much. So pregnancy and everything that is connected with it, it is a woman's care." From this simple reasoning on the soul of Kathy became even more disgusting. It can be like that. It seems that a person argues logically, consistently, and you listen and realize that he is just a coward. "I thought we were in love," she said sadly. "You said yourself that you love me, didn't you? Don't you remember?" "I do, but I didn't say I wanted to have children." Robert pointed out. Why put it all in one place? And to tell the truth, he wasn't lying. There was no talk of children, but Kathy thought that one thing implied another. The holy woman Vanessa and the whole wonderful orphanage staff taught their pupils to take care of themselves and others, not to wait for help from the state, to earn their own money, but how to teach them to beware of people's irresponsibility, thoughtlessness, common dishonesty? Kathy, noticing her friend's distress, Robert began, "Let's talk frankly. We have not been together long enough, and it is too early to talk about true love. At most about falling in love, attraction, and passion. Wouldn't you agree that's true?" Maybe it is. Kathy didn't disagree. It's probably true. But don't you realize that the situation has changed? Our with you love, do not love, it is now a matter of tenth. There is a child, it is already there, and you and I, as parents, need to think about its future, not about our own hobbies. We can agree on that. This baby, Kathy, is not good for you or me right now. Get rid of it, and you and I can continue to date, get to know each other, and who knows, maybe someday. I've been gotten rid of too. The girl interrupted him. My father and mother didn't need me either, so they took me to the forest. But that's quite an atrocity. Robert was horrified, but I don't want it to come to that. Look, what's 5 weeks? It's just a clot of cells. But if left unchecked, it could ruin both our lives. You want us to make a deal? I'm making a deal, and you don't like it. It's not a deal. Kathy flared up. Doesn't that mean finding a solution that works for everyone? Do you want to be happy? Is that what you think of me? It's not for you. It's for me to get an abortion. And you want to buy that we'll keep seeing each other. And maybe get married someday. Do you think I want to be in a relationship with a traitor? I'm not a traitor. I'm being honest about what I want. And if you decide to have the baby, you know I won't want to continue the relationship. I'm not planning on rushing into this. You'll file for child support, of course, and I'll have to pay for something I didn't want and don't want. Imagine going to the store, looking at something, and they won't let you out until you pay. How is that fair? You don't even have any money on you. You just came in to wait out the rain. But no, they make you pay. It's not fair, finally. What if you went to the store, took a bite of cake, they make you pay for it? Is that fair? Don't twist things around, Kathy. Besides, have you thought about yourself? Okay, me. My well-being is not part of your calculations, I get that. What about you? You can't get a big alimony check. You wanted to study, but if you decide to keep the baby, what's the point of studying? Think about it. I'm asking you to think about it. I've already thought about everything. The girl said firmly and looked at Robert, right into his handsome face. There was no love left. Washed it away with a wave of cold Robert's cynicism, all his supposedly reasonable reasoning, but in fact just designed to mask the fear that now his cozy, quiet life will change. "What did I see in you?" she asked quietly. "You look like a big, strong man, but inside you're a little boy who's afraid of everything. You're afraid of everything, Robert. You only had enough to pick up a stray cat, and you don't want to know your own child. Calm down, you fool. Don't cry. We don't need your alimony." She left without even slamming the door behind her. Robert rubbed his forehead and smiled. A stone had fallen from his soul. He was truly grateful to Kathy for her pride, the kind that if she said she didn't need alimony, she wouldn't ask for it. Oh, and he'd already started thinking of ways to get a smaller amount out of his income. He'd have to negotiate at work to draw him a certificate of his miserable salary, and that would be so tedious. He'd made a mistake with Kathy, of course. He thought that since she worked in a famous clinic, she probably had a good salary and a nice apartment, but the main bummer was that when he was making inquiries about the clinic, he found pictures of its owner, Wendy, on the internet. and when he saw Kathy, he nearly collapsed on the floor. The young receptionist looked uncannily like Wendy. Robert was sure that Kathy was the daughter of the clinic owner. Probably the mother had decided to let her favorite daughter work under supervision. Why, the work is not dusty, and on a salary, who would hurt his child? And in the long run, the girl, the owner of the clinic. No, it's definitely a good fit. Who knew she was a former foster kid? And her salary is meager, and her apartment is a studio apartment that hasn't been renovated in 100 years. Though Kathy tries somehow to improve her poor dwelling, to plaster here and there, to paste tiles here, as they say, poor but clean. I put up new wallpaper, but you can't hide poverty. It climbs out of every crevice, annoying, insolent, but that's for those who know how to look. In short, it's good that Kathy got rid of her without too much trouble. He doesn't need a pregnant orphan. And Kathy wanted to talk to someone to try to find a way out of all this hopelessness. Nancy, on learning of her friend's pregnancy, was almost hysterical. How can you be so naive? She screamed. They all sing songs about love as long as they want their own. As soon as they get their tails pinched, they say, "No, no, no, no. I don't owe you anything. I didn't promise you anything." And your eyes are as flat as a plonk, like carrots. Kathy grinned, or like a cat's, big and round, round. Oh, Kathy, my friend shook her head sadly. You should have consulted me. Men, what are they like? Well, like stray dogs. They should be accustomed to themselves slowly, gradually, without pressure, and you immediately boom, a shoe on the head. All right, let's think about how to cope. And how I'll give birth. Raise them. Give birth? In syllables, interrogated Nancy. You, Kathy, do you realize what you're saying? What are you talking about? All right, don't dust. I know a good clinic. It's confidential safe. I'll take you there. I'm going into labor. The girl repeated stubbornly. I've already decided. It's not too late to change your mind before it's too late. But you understand, it's, I don't even know, a kitten, and then you think 100 times. And this is a whole baby. Is that why you don't have cats? Kathy smiled. Our Kathy. She was stopped at the front door by the owner of the clinic. I need to talk to you. Come in right now, it's urgent. Actually, the owner's appearance at the clinic was an unusual event in itself. Wendy rarely came here, preferring to conduct her business from home. Thank goodness modern communications allowed for that. Plus, she often left the receptionist in her place and went to warm countries with her daughter. Our winters are too long, she'd say. We need a break from it somehow. In the owner's absence, her ex-husband, Benjamin, was in charge. It was said that he had once been a rich man, and it was in those carefree times that he had married the beautiful Wendy, who was a couple of decades younger than he was. He was flattered that his young wife, only 20 years old against his 40, was the winner of the City Beauty contest. He had organized her winning the contest himself as a wedding present. To keep Wendy busy, he bought a dyeing business from a friend on the cheap and gave it to his wife. Wendy, on the other hand, started reluctantly, but then suddenly got involved. She really wanted her veterinary clinic to become the best in town, and she achieved this by using her husband's money and listening to his advice. But then dark times came for Benjamin. His own business, his business went under, taking his half-brother as his manager. Benjamin, after a few months, found he'd been ripped off. Wendy, with a newborn daughter, was instantly taken over by his brother. The bankrupt businessman decided that enough of his dangerous games and went to work in an ordinary carpentry shop. He had less money, but his son became healthy. Wendy did not long enjoy marital happiness with her second husband. The money was wasted, and the careless owner went to jail for burglary. Confused and unhappy Wendy tried to return to Benjamin, but he refused to accept her. But he did not refuse to help her if she needed to look after the affairs of the veterinary clinic. Why would he do that? Out of Christian charity, out of pity for his hapless ex, or out of concern for his daughter, no one knew. But today Wendy, personally present at the clinic, and moreover, talked to the usual receptionist. It was doubly unusual. Up to this point, she had only gone as far as talking to the doctors. In the office, there was already a tea table set with sweets. "Help yourself," invited the proprietress. "Thank you, Wendy. I've just had breakfast. Did you say it was urgent?" "Yes, indeed I did." She smiled so insincerely that Kathy didn't immediately realize she wasn't going to hear anything good. "You grew up in an orphanage, didn't you?" Wendy asked. "In an orphanage. I always seem to," said the warden thoughtfully. "That orphanage kids are so unstable, and I see you know what's what in this life. Our orphanage was special." Kathy smiled. "We were taught to cook, to clean, and even to earn money. Vanessa, this is our supervisor." "Vanessa?" Wendy asked. I know. We were in the same school, even in the same class. She was always so helpful, kind. I remember all the stray dogs knew her because she fed them. True, after school we did not communicate with her, but I heard about the shelter. Sometimes I wish I'd given her my queen." "Who?" "Yes, my daughter Emily." The woman sighed. "You know," in a trusting tone of voice, she said. "She's already 17, and she still can't cut her own bread. She seems to know where the money comes from, but how it's earned." She wrote today, "Mom, I'm going shopping with my girlfriends today. Put 10 to 15,000 on my card. This money is like a dime to her." What kind of world does she live in? The real world, or some fairy tale about the golden antelope? Wendy stopped talking and angrily blew a strand of hair out of her face. "So I decided to follow your Vanessa's example. I'm going to teach her to work. Do you think that's a good idea?" Kathy looked at her boss in confusion. Why would she want to consult with a receptionist? Labor education is good for everyone. So it's a great idea. I think so too. Wendy was delighted. "I've decided to take the fool to work. Let her start her working career under my supervision. She can start by sitting at the front desk. You teach her everything, okay? And once she's learned everything, I'll hire her full-time. And by then, you'll have enough time to find something else to do." "Stop!" Unexpectedly, I interrupted my boss, Kathy. "Do you want me to leave?" "Well, yes." Wendy shrugged. "My Emily has to work somewhere to keep you too. What's the point? I want Emily to learn to earn her own allowance. And if she works part-time, what will she earn, Tears? So we have a deal, Kathy. Will you teach Emily?" "Well, how could I not?" The girl smiled. "Of course I will, and I'll teach her, and I'll quit, so that only your idle girl will do something. Don't get your hopes up, Wendy. I won't do it. Don't be rude to me. You're still working for me, don't forget. Not anymore. That's for me to decide, not you. How dare you talk to me like that? How dare you talk to people like that? You have to work 2 more weeks. The boss yelled at me." And where did all her charm and allure go? Smooth and well-groomed face, created for smiles and successful photos, suddenly became somehow frozen like a mask. And only her lips curved ugly, and her eyes burned with the wild anger of a landlady whom she had suddenly disobeyed, a serf. "You are bound by the law. Do you even know that there is such a thing as labor law?" Kathy suddenly realized why Wendy's face looked so frightening. She couldn't even frown because of the Botox injections. And that lack of facial expression, combined with the angry look and the shrill voice, was the scariest thing of all. The labor code. You ever heard of it? Have you heard anything about hiring and firing procedures? Have you ever signed an employment contract with me? No. I work unofficially so you, Wendy, can pay less tax. So don't scare me. It's pointless. I don't owe you anything. And I'm leaving immediately. Good luck adjusting your Emily to the real world. I have connections. Wendy hissed back at her. It's not hard to make a contract and forge your signature. Go ahead. Kathy agreed almost cheerfully. And I have the number of the tax office. I can tell a lot of interesting things. But despite the apparent victory from the clinic, Kathy went out almost in despair. Was the whole world conspiring against her? Everyone had turned their backs, everyone. Her lover, her friend, and now no job. Where was she supposed to go now? Jesus Christ, what to do now? Go home. I told Kathy to go home. What do we do? We'll figure that out later. Right now, go home, make some tea and think about it. But home was only slightly easier. It was uncomfortable to sit alone in four walls. I wanted to talk to someone, not to complain, but just to be near someone alive, a human voice to hear. The girl suddenly wanted to visit her shelter. Probably, just as an adult in a difficult situation, and for the first time in all this time, Kathy suddenly felt her heavy, painful tension let go. The fear of the future. She can handle it. The world is not without good people. And the proof of that was sitting across from her. Thank you, Vanessa, she smiled. And suddenly she felt bitter tears flowing down her cheeks. Don't cry, the woman said sternly and immediately stroked the head of her pupil. That's what we are, people to help each other and otherwise how to live. I'm just a little ashamed. Kathy confessed. I just came to stay here, to remember my childhood, but it was like asking for help. Vanessa nodded and smiled. And you're ashamed of that. Remember something, girl, something I read somewhere, and it's always stuck in my memory. Asking for help doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're not alone in the world. That's it, Kathy. That's it. And here's the other thing. By the time our baby's born, it'll be 5 years since you got your apartment. Here's what we could do. You could move in with us, live in a shelter and rent out your apartment. You'll get an allowance, and you'll work, so you'll make a reasonable amount of money. And then you'll study, and you won't need to be wise. You'll earn a normal income. Kathy smiled through her tears, nodded and thanked. Vanessa was the only person who supported her in such a difficult moment. It would seem so. But who am I to her? How many Kathys does she have? Well, that's the kind of person Vanessa is. She wouldn't leave you in the lurch. I got her to scrub floors too, Vanessa. I talked to a sponsor. He needs a cleaner in his office. Evening hours. Would you do it? It's not paying $1 million, but a little extra money wouldn't hurt. Right? You'll have a salary. The office is small. You can do everything in 40 minutes. You'll come after the end of the working day. That is at 7. What do you say? Thank you, I say, Vanessa, replied Kathy. I'm all for it. How far is the office? Just a stone's throw away. And by the way, you can start today. Payment is once a week on your card on Mondays. Kathy was almost happy. Now she wasn't so scared of the future. At the shelter, she worked as a cook 2 days and 2 days out with another girl. And now another part-time job that wasn't hard. Of course, it's infinitely far from her dream job, she repeated to herself. But in our position, there's no point in getting cocky. We have some money, and that's fine. And then the baby would be born, and there would be more and allowances, and money from renting an apartment, and maybe we could even study. She wanted badly to share her joy with someone, but at least with Nancy, though she wouldn't appreciate it. But Nancy was away at some resort with her chief lover and was unavailable for communication. After a couple of months, the friends did get to see each other, but Kathy quickly realized that sharing good news with Nancy was a really bad idea. Scrubbing floors is for beggars. Nancy snorted. "I'm sorry, Kathy, but if you're down to it, you know it's just a dump. You're all ready." She glanced disapprovingly at her friend's washed-out t-shirt and skirt, which had obviously been chosen only for its elasticized waistband, but had no other merit. "You're already one step away from the bottom," she finished confidently. "For example, look at what you're wearing. It's a disgrace, not clothes. Do not sew normal clothes for pregnant women. I'm dressed like this because I'm coming from work, and my job is mopping floors. It's stupid to show up in a dressy outfit and mop." "Well, let's say." Nancy agreed, "but what you're wearing is old and faded, and your hair is all gone." She lifted a strand of her friend's hair with 2 fingers. Kathy immediately pulled back. She'd never liked that kind of unceremonious touching. "You've got all the roots growing out. It's so unkempt. You look like a beggar." "And I am a beggar now." Kathy wasn't offended at all. "If I was kicked out of my job, it means you didn't work hard enough. You should have worked harder." "No, it means that my boss's daughter has to start somewhere. So now she works as a receptionist in a clinic, and I can write my own letter of resignation and be on my way." "But I left without a letter of resignation. No one officially hired me, so there's no one to fire. Isn't there any registrars needed anywhere else? Like this?" And Kathy pointed to her eloquently rounded belly. "You wouldn't believe it, they don't. Who needs an employee who's about to go on maternity leave? And to us washerwomen, somehow easier to treat. No registration, no maternity pay. You come in, you clean up, you get paid. Money." Nancy gave me a scornful look. "You call that money? You don't need much. I wouldn't lift a finger for that little thing. I have no choice." Kathy answered calmly, "When you don't have any money at all, you'll be glad to have something to put on your plate." Kathy bit her lip and was silent for a long time. She saw that her friend didn't understand her at all and judged her, which was much worse, and even became ashamed of her undemanding nature. Kathy had long ago realized that for some reason many people considered the struggle for survival an unworthy cause and would rather sit and cry than take up what was on offer. After all, Nancy had an intermediate moment in her life when she had not yet met her Kevin, and she was forced out of her job due to downsizing. So she suggested to Nancy that she talk to her boss about employment. Their veterinary clinic was in need of a second person at the front desk. Nancy smiled slyly and wondered, "How much will I be paid?" When she heard the salary, she grinned, "It won't be enough for me, you little thing. And the schedule is 2 after 2. It is not to see the light of day, but even a little money is better than nothing." Objected Kathy, somewhat hurt by the neglect of her friend. "I will not work for such wages." Slowly emphasizing the intonation of the words, repeated Nancy, "Did I say something I didn't understand?" Even then Kathy thought that their intimate friendship seemed to be coming to an end. Nancy, willingly or unwillingly, had just humiliated her. She had made it clear that Kathy was content with a pittance that she, Nancy, would not look at, even though she herself was now sitting without any money at all. Her words left an unpleasant residue, especially since it was clear that if Nancy had said it without thinking, she would have apologized. So she had just said what she wanted to say. And now she has re-emphasized that Kathy is happy with petty cash. I don't get it. Why are you so eager to humiliate me? She asked bluntly. Is this how you elevate yourself in your own eyes? You wouldn't work for a small salary. Fine, but it's your decision. You sit around and wait for a bigger one to be offered, but I choose to go and earn something so I don't starve to death waiting for better times. I'm not humiliating you. Nancy was confused. I'm just saying that, well, I wouldn't work there. And I'm not allowed to express my opinion. I'd have got over it if you hadn't. Kathy replied bitterly, and I'd have been much happier if you'd been supportive. She returned home that evening with a heavy heart. That was all. No, she has more of a friend, Nancy, because, yeah, is that how real friends act? I mean, what's the big deal? That friendship is long gone, and Kathy knew it all along, but she only realized it today. And when she did, she suddenly felt a tremendous sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. Kathy was lucky. The pregnancy was easy. No toxicosis, no distractions, no swelling. Even on the contrary, the future mother felt a surge of strength and energy, which allowed her to work almost without fatigue and even carve out time to prepare for exams. She still had hopes of studying to be a veterinarian. Vanessa encouraged and supported her in every possible way. Good for you for not giving up. Now you have a child to raise, and the profession, and such a demanded, you will be useful in any case. After all, animals, like people, will always need medical help. Even if in the city all stop having pets, you just get together and go to the village to work. Cows and goats also need doctors. So prepare properly and remember, you are doing this not only for yourself, but also for your baby. You're like my mom. Kathy said affectionately, and Vanessa smiled at her. How could it be any other way? You're my mom, all of you. All of you who have been brought up here are like children. You raise everyone, you lead everyone. It's probably hard to understand, even if you don't encounter it. I think I do, said Kathy. After all, but many of us at least, and parents have never known their parents. We only had an orphanage, a tutor and you. And if someone looks at you as a mother, you become one. The headmistress didn't answer her anything, only stroked her head habitually. But Kathy had no time to notice the tears glistening in the woman's eyes. In the evening, she still ran around scrubbing the office floor. And although Kathy had never seen the owner, she received money on her card every Monday, and often with a larger amount, and such transfers were accompanied by a short note. Bonus. In general, cleaning this office was not a difficult job. It was only necessary to wipe the dust and wash the floors. Nothing in the chief's office needed to be cleaned. That's just the way he is. Vanessa explained. He doesn't like his things to be touched. He cleans his own. Well, that's the kind of thing a man has. Well, that's fine with him. It's less work for you. By the way, I told him you'd be out of work in a couple months. But what's his name, by the way? Kathy asked. I haven't seen him. I don't even know his name. His name is James, the superintendent replied. Well, he told me that he would wait for you for 3 months after the birth. If you want to keep working, you can come back. Did you ask him to do that? Kathy smiled. No way. The woman resented him. It's just that he's very happy with your work, so he's willing to support you. Do you think it's so easy to find a good employee? Oh, Kathy, there's always a shortage. Kathy decided to take this explanation for granted and didn't ask any more questions. And yes, Vanessa suddenly remembered. I almost forgot. He was away on business yesterday and will be back tomorrow. He asked me to clean his office during these 2 days. But for God's sake, don't move anything in there. I don't care if the whole desk is full of papers and chairs are lying around. Anyway, your job is to wipe the dust and mop the floors and nothing else. It was even scary to enter the chief's office, in case he accidentally touches some trifle, and then you'll get a harsh reprimand from the boss. But once I was in the Holy of Holies, I realized that there was nothing to worry about. The place was so perfectly tidy that I probably didn't need to clean it. But since you asked, Kathy pulled a dust rag from the pocket of her lab coat. James, it had to be said, was clearly the kind of person who liked to go over everything. For example, when hiring a new cleaner, he always asked about her clothing size so that he could buy the appropriate work coat and all the rags, cleaning gloves, detergents, brooms. All of this he kept on top of, and in time to purchase what was needed. Kathy decided to start with the desk. It was almost completely empty. A pen, a day planner, and a framed picture of a little girl. Probably a daughter, or maybe a granddaughter. Kathy quickly wiped the desk and was about to dust off the portrait. Only leaning closer to the photo did she suddenly freeze. She knew the little girl in the picture, and she couldn't help but know it, for a photograph of the little girl, seemingly at the same age, was kept in Kathy's own file. And underneath the photo was the caption, Kathy. In the picture, in both of those pictures, was her, Vanessa. Before Kathy knew it, she had grabbed her cell phone out of her pocket and dialed the number of the orphanage manager. Vanessa, can you hear me? Yes, Kathy. As always, the woman answered calmly. What's wrong? You told me to clean the chief's office. Yeah, did you break anything? No, said Kathy, but he has a picture of me as a kid on his desk. There was a confused silence. Kathy? Vanessa finally spoke up. And you, in one word, are you sure you're not imagining it? Could it be a similar girl? You said this man is a sponsor of our orphanage. Kathy interrupted her. Has he ever been to the orphanage himself? Could he have seen me there? The superintendent thought for a moment. No, I don't remember that. He always sent couriers, but he never visited the orphanage. I wanted to invite him to the Christmas party once, but he replied strangely that it was hard for him to see the children. I thought he must have had some terrible tragedy in his life. Kathy, why are we guessing at the end of the day? Let me call him right now and find out. Kathy looked at the pictures of herself as a child again, and forgetting that the superintendent couldn't see her, shook her head. No, I guess I shouldn't. I mean, just don't. He'll be back tomorrow. I'll come to work early and talk to him. Okay, Vanessa agreed. Here's the thing, Kathy. I'll just go with you. Just to be on the safe side, Jane sat at the desk and looked at the picture of Kathy in the file or at the framed photo. Vanessa and Kathy sat silently across from him. Finally, he sighed and covered his face with his hands. This is impossible. He said in a strangled voice, It's completely impossible. Kathy, oh my God, how could it be? Didn't Wendy say you drowned? Wendy? Vanessa asked. Who's that? My daughter's mother. The man said angrily, If you can even call that bastard a mother. We were dating, even though I knew I didn't mean it. Wendy wanted a richer man, and I was just a lowlife. Anyway, she quickly realized that I wasn't worth much, and things were coming to an end. I was initially very attracted to her, and then I realized that no, the girl to other people's money greedy. I gave her a white car, as I remember now, and it was a medium-sized car. And when Wendy saw it, she curled her lips, and then she said, Why didn't you give me your money? Oh, unite? That's when it all became clear to me. I wasn't worried that such a beautiful girl would leave me. But then she comes running one day and immediately screams that she's pregnant. The terms are missed, and the child is mine. Yeah, James shrugged. I didn't believe her, honestly. I thought she just wanted it. I don't know. Trying to get me to spend money again. Anyway, I sent her away. I thought I'd forget about it, and forgot about it for a while. Didn't think about it for 2 years. I was in the Czech Republic on business. That's how the business for 2 years and dragged me down but never mind. And then I felt that no, I can't do that. My heart's not in the right place. I called her, and there were strangers on the phone. I went to her house and found out something. Allegedly, she gave birth to a baby girl, but then she rented out her apartment and lived in another neighborhood, in a rich neighborhood. And she had a man who seemed to be so respectable, but it's not hard to find out about the man. I still had some connections in town. The guy was really well paid and older than Wendy, a lot older. What do I care? I wanted to see my daughter. Once I caught up with my beautiful ex, I wanted to talk to her, and she tells me that my daughter went to the village to her grandmother and drowned in the river. She says, and she herself is crying. Then she took this picture out of her purse and gave it to me. Kathy was found in the woods. The shelter manager said with a sigh. A forest ranger found her. The girl was all alone. She had a note with her saying her name was Lisa, that she was healthy, and that she couldn't be cared for. Wendy, gritting his teeth, James. Snake, she's not a woman, she's a witch. Wendy? Kathy suddenly asked. So her name is Wendy? Well, yeah. She sort of divorced her husband afterwards, and then I don't know what afterwards. She has a veterinary clinic. Right. He slammed his open palm on the table. Let's go to her. Let's all go, James. Vanessa tried to stop him. Maybe you shouldn't get so hot. Chill out. Vanessa. He turned toward her, and the woman stepped back. There was so much suffering in his gaze. For so many years I thought my daughter, that she had drowned, and she'd been living in an orphanage all this time? She didn't know her father or her mother. I couldn't bear to look at the children, my heart sank. If it hadn't been for chance, she and I would never have found each other. And you're telling me to chill out. Kathy. He took his daughter by the hand. Daughter, you can't be nervous. You'd better stay at home. I'll deal with your mom myself, and then I'll come and tell you everything. And you and Vanessa. That's right. Vanessa cheered up. This is your business, and me and Kathy. Unnecessary nerves do not need. We'll stay together, have tea and cakes. Yes. James, Dad. Kathy looked pleadingly at her father. Maybe you shouldn't go either. Maybe it's over. The important thing is that everything's okay now. You'll be a grandfather soon. What's the point? The man hugged his daughter and kissed her affectionately on the top of her head. I'll be back very soon, Kathy, he promised. Wendy, meanwhile, was almost perfectly happy. She felt 20 years younger, and that happened to her every time she got a new lover. This time it was a totally awesome character. A pure Viking. If only I'd known my clinic had such handsome clients. She murmured, standing on tiptoe to reach the guy's lips. You'd show up for work more often. So what's your kitty's name, Helva? Robert smiled and touched Wendy's lips with his fingertips. Yes, she's got a sweet tooth. I wonder how old she is. You can't tell from her face, but she must be putting more money into herself than he could ever dream of. Halva is my favorite treat. By the way, how about we take a trip to the birthplace of Oriental sweets together? Oh, come on. Where would I get that kind of money? Sha, honey. I'll pay for it myself, and you don't need to talk about it. Suddenly she stammered and looked fearfully at the door. Some voices were coming from behind it. "You can't go to Wendy's. I'm allowed." A man's voice bellowed back. At the same second, the door swung open with a bang. James looked disdainfully at the tall guy Wendy was clinging to. "Get out of here." He tossed it carelessly. "You can wait outside, because I have an important conversation with Wendy." Robert looked at Wendy confusedly and, noticing her slight nod, left the office. "What do you want, James?" the woman asked. She looked perfectly calm. "Is that allowed? You barge into my office, distract me from something important." "What's all the fuss about? You told me." He started, looking her straight in the eye. "You told me our daughter was dead." "That she drowned." "She was." Wendy agreed. "And you came just to remind me of that misfortune." "Then there was no need to try." "I've never forgotten the fact that—" "Ah, that you, a witch, left a 2-year-old girl alone in the woods, and you didn't care if she died or lived. That she was found by a forest ranger is unheard of. You filthy, disgusting monster. You could never forget that. Tell me, why did you do it? Why didn't you put her in an orphanage when she was such a nuisance to you? Why did you leave her to her fate?" Wendy still remained impenetrable. She pulled out a long, thin cigarette and took her time smoking it. "Because," she answered calmly, "that then there would have been some tails left, and I had to be clean before my fiancé. I have no idea what he would do if he found out I had a child. Maybe he would have chased me away, maybe not, but I couldn't take any chances. If I hadn't gotten married, where would I be now? I'd be living in some rundown house with leaky faucets. No money and no hope. Was I supposed to choose poverty? That's why I sent my child to her death. But she survived." Indifferently, Wendy shrugged. "And I never loved her anyway. She was ruining my life. What did I see with her but squeals and snot? I should have left her at the hospital right away, but for some reason I didn't realize it at the time, and then I regretted it every minute. And when I had a chance to make my life better, I had to turn it down. I wonder how many years you'll spend in prison, where you'll no doubt belong. How much will they give you if your dirty black secret gets out? Just think about it. A little girl, defenseless, alone in a dark forest, abandoned there by her own mother. What kind of punishment do you think a woman like that deserves? And what are the headlines everywhere? The owner of a thriving veterinary clinic tried to kill her own child in cold blood. Who would show up here after that? Who would trust a clinic run by a baby killer with their hamster? Get out of town, Wendy. Close that lousy office, take your mail and go far away, and don't come back here. You come into this town and you know what's waiting for you." And without another word, he turned abruptly and left the office. Robert immediately appeared in the doorway. "Well, what interesting news. I just found out," he said, looking meaningfully at the woman. "And I wonder what I'll do with them." Several months passed. Wendy sat on the sand and looked at the sea waves. Now all she had to do was sit there and watch. Robert, her sweet Viking, had turned out to be a notorious extortionist. He overheard a conversation under the door and then started demanding money for his silence. The sums got bigger and bigger, and then the moment came when there was nothing left to pay. Robert, quite contented and rich, immediately left in an unknown direction, and Wendy was left in her only dress and penniless. Now she came to the beach every day and just sat on the shore waiting for darkness. People left, but after them in the trash cans, there was a mountain of leftovers. When Wendy first dared to stick her hand in the pile of garbage, a well-fed rat jumped out of the container with a wild squeal. Wendy bounced away, but the rat rushed past. Going near the trash was scary. What if there were more of the less timid, rat-like kin sitting there? But I was hungry, unbearably hungry. And then Wendy noticed that at the top of the trash heap, there was a piece of bread tortilla that had not been eaten. Armed with a twig, she picked it up and pulled it to the ground. That night, Wendy fell asleep feeling satiated. And that feeling of satisfied hunger was so wonderful that she was no longer intimidated by the trash rats. Being able to get some food was far more important. But cold weather was ahead, and the woman knew that with the closing of the beach season, she would have to beg for a night shelter. There was still a way to get in. They said they didn't take everyone, favoring proven tenants who were absolutely certain not to cause trouble. Wendy filled her palms with seawater and tried to wash her face and iron her hair. She had to make a good impression on the administration of the lodge. It wouldn't be easy, of course, but she would try hard. The homeless shelter was in a good location. It was in an industrial zone, so gassy that it seemed as if you were not inhaling the air here, but eating it, swallowing piece after piece with difficulty. But, of course, in general, all these night shelters, they are in the Department of Social Services, and social services in all countries of the world hate to spend money. They're so pro-waste. Wendy, looking around, walked quickly toward the long line of sloppily dressed people apparently being admitted to the night shelter there. She quietly stood at the tail of the line and tried to listen to the quiet conversations. Maybe she could find out how to behave so that they would definitely take her in. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Wendy shuddered with surprise when she heard a familiar voice. "I'm talking to you, Auntie." And at the same second, someone's clinging hand clawed at the woman's dress. Did everyone see that? I've only gone around the corner, and she's already here. Insolent woman. Let me go, asshole. Wendy was spinning around, hoping to get out of someone else's tight grip. "Let go," I said. She dodged and bit her tormentor's hand. "Ay, she bit me. Are you drunk or something? You're throwing yourself at people." Wendy, breathing hard, brushed her hair out of her face. "You could have politely told me I was taking your place." She looked up into the tall man's face. "Robert?" Yes, it was Robert. Ragged and dirty and smelled worse than a dumpster. See how we met. Crooked, he grinned. "All your money went to pay off your debts. I'm in a shelter too. I want to wait out the cold. Well, let's get in line, or someone else will come and beat us." They got in line one after another, and now they could only hope that they would be able to get into the shelter and find some kind of a roof over their heads, even if only for a short time. And no one in the world cared about them. No one, because they deserved it all. Karma? Boomerang? Yes, it was. That was the punishment for two lonely and lost souls.